Chapter 1. The Unlikely Commission. The air in Elara Vance's workshop hung thick with the scent of aged wood, beeswax, and the faint, metallic tang of antique brass. Dust motes, like tiny, hesitant stars, danced in the single shaft of late afternoon sun that pierced the grimy windowpane, illuminating the precarious stacks of mechanical curiosities, disassembled clockworks, and half-restored automatons that filled every available surface. Her fingers, calloused but nimble, traced the delicate filigree of a broken pocket watch, its tiny gears scattered across a velvet cloth like forgotten jewels. A sigh, heavy with unspoken worry, escaped her lips. "Elara, are you even listening to me?" Imani's voice, a warm, grounding presence, cut through the quiet hum of Elara's thoughts. Imani perched on a stool amidst the organized chaos, a half-eaten croissant in her hand, her brow furrowed with familiar concern. The landlord called again. He used the word eviction notice, Elara. He didn't sound like he was joking this time. Elara's gaze drifted from the intricate watch mechanism to the worn-out soles of her boots, then to the chipped ceramic mug of cold tea on her workbench. She knew Imani was right, always was. The numbers didn't lie, even if Elara preferred to lose herself in the silent stories of forgotten objects. The rent was 3 months late. The utilities bill was a monstrous crimson envelope she had yet to open. Her meager savings, once a comforting cushion, had dwindled to a desperate thread. "I know, Imani," Elara mumbled, her voice a little hoarse. She picked up a minuscule brass screw with tweezers, her movements precise, almost meditative. "I'm working on it. I need a big commission. Something that truly speaks to me, something that truly needs me." Imani snorted, a soft, exasperated sound. "What you need, Elara, is a commission that pays, not one that whispers to your soul about the tragic love story of a Victorian automaton. We can't eat intuition, honey, or pay the rent with it." She gestured around the cluttered workshop, a gesture that encompassed not just the mess, but Elara's entire precarious existence. "You're brilliant, Elara, truly. No one can do what you do, but your brilliance doesn't come with a direct deposit option." Elara winced. She knew Imani loved her, but the truth, spoken so plainly, always stung. Her gift, as some politely called it, her uncanny knack for mechanical antiquities, often felt more like a curse. She could touch an object, a relic from another time, and feel its history, a faint echo of the hands that had crafted it, the lives it had touched. Sometimes, if the object was particularly potent, she'd experience fleeting visions, a flash of an old ballroom, the scent of pipe tobacco, the sharp pang of a long-lost heartbreak. It wasn't always a clear narrative, more like fragmented sensory memories, but it allowed her to understand the inner workings of complex machines with an intimacy no diagram could provide. It also made her intensely picky, drawn only to objects that resonated with her, often to the detriment of her bank account. "There's something coming," Elara said, almost to herself, her fingers still hovering over the tiny watch. A strange tremor, a whisper of anticipation, had been prickling at the edges of her awareness for days now. It was like the air before a storm, a subtle shift that only she seemed to notice. Imani just sighed, taking another bite of her croissant. Just make sure it's coming with a fat check, not just good vibes. The universe, it seemed, had a darkly ironic sense of humor. Or perhaps, Elara thought later that week, a very specific and very expensive sense of timing. It started with an email. Not just any email, but one sent from an encrypted server, addressed simply to E. Vance Antiquarian Mechanics. The subject line read, "Confidential Commission Inquiry." No company name, no sender details beyond a string of alphanumeric characters. Her heart, already a frantic drumbeat against her ribs from the latest red-stamped bill, quickened its pace. Opening it felt like cracking open a sealed vault. The message was terse, professional, and almost unnervingly direct. It described an object, A unique, complex automaton appearing as an ornate music box requiring specialized restoration, of considerable age and intricate design. Discretion paramount. Location: private estate, remote. Compensation: negotiable, but anticipated to be significantly above market rate for a successful restoration. No photographs. No further details about the object's origin or specific issues. Just a number for a secure line and a request for her availability for an immediate consultation. Elara reread it 3 times, then passed her phone to Amani, who had abandoned her stable, museum curator job for the day to supervise Elara's descent into destitution. Amani's eyes widened as she read. Significantly above market rate? Elara, this could be it. This could be the one that saves your bacon. She looked around the workshop, her gaze lingering on a particularly rusty contraption, and gets you some actual bacon for dinner. A thrill, cold and sharp, snaked through Elara's veins, quickly followed by a prickle of unease. It's so vague, and the discretion part. It feels a little cloak and dagger, doesn't it? It's rich people, Elara, Amani countered, handing the phone back. They're always cloak and dagger. Probably some eccentric billionaire who found a weird family heirloom and doesn't want anyone to know about it. Think of the zeros, Elara. Imagine the zeros. The zeros did sound appealing. Desperately appealing. Elara's fingers hovered over the secure line number. The rational part of her screamed scam, danger, too good to be true. But the intuitive part, the part that connected her to the silent histories of objects, felt a strange, compelling pull. It wasn't the strong, resonant echo she often felt when truly special objects were near, but a faint, insistent hum, like a distant, complex melody. With a deep breath that tasted faintly of old metal and desperation, Elara dialed. The voice on the other end was clipped, efficient, and devoid of warmth. A man. He confirmed her identity, her specialty, then gave her precise instructions for the following morning. A private car would pick her up at a designated, anonymous location, far from her workshop. No personal vehicles. No phones permitted beyond a secure, temporary device they would provide. Absolute silence regarding the nature of her visit. It was all so clandestine, so over the top, it bordered on ridiculous. But the sheer audacity, coupled with the promise of a life-changing sum, overruled her every instinct for caution. She needed this. She needed it more than she cared to admit, even to herself. The next morning, the promised black car, sleek and silent as a predator, arrived precisely on time. The driver, a man with eyes that missed nothing, gave her the temporary phone, a bare-bones device with a single pre-programmed number, and relieved her of her own. The journey was long, taking her far from the familiar urban sprawl, past sprawling farmlands that slowly gave way to dense, ancient forests. The road became narrower, winding, until they were on a private, perfectly paved drive, flanked by meticulously manicured grounds that seemed to stretch into infinity. Then the gates. They were colossal, wrought iron, intricately designed, yet undeniably imposing, almost aggressively private. They slid open silently, revealing a long, tree-lined avenue that led to an architectural marvel. Kaelen Thorne's estate was less a house, and more a futuristic fortress carved into the very landscape. It was a symphony of glass and steel, sharp angles and sweeping curves, nestled against a backdrop of rugged, forested hills. The main structure seemed to emerge organically from the earth, reflecting the pale morning sky in its vast, tinted windows. It was utterly breathtaking, in a cold, austere way that made Elara shiver despite the warmth of the car's interior. This was not a home, it was a statement. A statement of power, of wealth, and of absolute, unyielding privacy. The car glided to a stop before a massive, unobtrusive entrance that blended seamlessly into the facade. Another man, equally unsmiling and impeccably dressed, opened her door. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice as smooth and unyielding as polished granite. "Welcome to Thorne Industries' private research division." Elara's stomach did a nervous flip. Research division. This wasn't just some rich eccentric's home. This was something far grander, far more secretive. The air, even indoors, felt charged, humming with an almost imperceptible energy, like a giant, silent machine idling. She was led through pristine corridors, past laboratories humming with unseen technology, the polished surfaces reflecting her own slightly disheveled appearance. Her worn canvas trousers and practical work jacket felt terribly out of place amidst the sleek, minimalist grandeur. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft thud of their footsteps. Finally, they stopped before a heavy, unmarked door. The man opened it, revealing a spacious, dimly lit room. It was clearly a private study or office, but one designed for contemplation, not for traditional work. One wall was a vast expanse of glass, offering a panoramic view of the distant, misty mountains. The opposite wall was lined with shelves of antique books, an unexpected touch of warmth in the otherwise stark environment. And there, standing by a large, antique desk carved from dark, gleaming wood, was a man. Kaelen Thorne. He was taller than she'd imagined, his frame lean and powerful beneath a tailored, charcoal suit that fit him with unnerving precision. His hair, a dark, almost raven black, was swept back from a high forehead, emphasizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones and jawline. But it was his eyes that truly arrested her. They were a startling, piercing shade of ice blue, framed by dark lashes, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel as though she were being meticulously dissected. There was no warmth in them, no hint of welcome, only a cool, assessing intelligence that seemed to strip away her defenses with a single glance. He didn't move, didn't offer a hand, didn't even smile. He simply stood, a statue of quiet power, and watched her approach. "Miss Vance," his voice was deep, resonant, and held a subtle, gravelly edge that sent a strange tremor through her. It was a voice that commanded attention, accustomed to being obeyed. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Thorne," Elara managed, her voice feeling thin and reedy in comparison. She felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to smooth down her jacket, to somehow make herself appear more substantial. The presence he exuded was almost physical, a palpable force that filled the room. She could feel a strange coldness emanating from him, not just a lack of warmth, but an active rejection of it. It was unsettling. He merely inclined his head, a minimal gesture. "The object is here." He gestured to the antique desk. Elara's gaze was immediately drawn to it. Perched on a display stand of dark velvet was a music box. But to call it merely a music box felt like a profound understatement. It was exquisite, a masterpiece of intricate craftsmanship. Fashioned from what appeared to be dark rosewood, it was adorned with panels of inlaid mother-of-pearl depicting mythical beasts and swirling constellations. Tiny, gilded gears and delicate brass levers were visible through glass panels on its sides, hinting at a complexity far beyond any ordinary musical automaton. Small, almost invisible clockwork figures were embedded within its design, their limbs delicately articulated, their faces frozen in expressions of ancient wonder. It was about the size of a large jewelry box, heavy and substantial, and even from across the room, Elara felt it. That hum, the distant, complex melody, it was stronger now, a faint vibration against her very bones. This was no mere antique. She walked towards the desk, drawn by an invisible thread. Kaelen Thorne remained motionless, watching her, his blue eyes unblinking. His stillness was almost unnerving, a predator's calm. As she neared the music box, the hum intensified, a low thrumming that resonated deep within her. It felt alive, not in the way a clock ticked or an engine purred, but with a subtle underlying pulse. Her fingers, almost without conscious thought, reached out, hovering inches above the polished surface of the rosewood. She felt it then, a jumble of sensations, like 1,000 tiny voices whispering at once. The faint scent of forgotten incense, the rustle of silk, the chill of a grand hall, and a profound, aching loneliness. But underneath those echoes of the past, something else vibrated, a distinct, almost electric energy, completely at odds with its apparent age. It felt like something ancient intertwined with something impossibly new. "It's remarkable," Elara whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes traced the delicate, almost microscopic engravings on a silver plate set into the lid. They looked like constellations, but also strangely like circuit diagrams. The details were bewildering, intricate beyond anything she had ever encountered in her years of restoring mechanical antiquities. "Indeed," Kaelen Thorne said, his voice cutting through her reverie. "It has been in my family for generations. Its mechanisms are unique, its purpose a mystery. We believe it requires a restoration of the highest caliber, Miss Vance, one that respects its singular nature." The way he said singular nature gave Elara a jolt. It wasn't just old to him, it was something else. She looked up, meeting his intense gaze. "What exactly do you wish for me to do, Mr. Thorne? It seems to be in excellent aesthetic condition." "Its aesthetic is not the issue," he replied, his voice flat. "It is dormant. It has been for decades. I wish for you to awaken it, to restore its functionality, without compromising its integrity, and without altering its core programming." Core programming. The words hung in the air, jarringly modern in the context of such an ancient-looking object. Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "Core programming," she repeated slowly. "Are you suggesting this is more than just a music box?" Kaelin's lips tightened, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement. "That is for you to discover, Miss Vance. Your reputation precedes you. Your unique abilities with such objects. We believe you are the only one capable of truly understanding its complexities." He was aware of her gift. That unnerved her even more. She swallowed, trying to steady her racing pulse. The hum from the music box was insistent now, a subtle plea, a silent invitation. She could almost hear it calling to her, challenging her. This wasn't just a job, it was an enigma wrapped in an ancient puzzle, and it felt profoundly important. She looked from the music box, whose silent beauty held a potent, almost sentient allure, to Kaelen Thorne, whose formidable presence was equally captivating, equally unsettling. He was a man of immense power, shrouded in an aura of cold detachment and hidden purpose. She could sense the weight of his family's legacy pressing down on him, a heavy, unspoken burden. There was a faint flicker of something in his icy eyes, a desperate hope perhaps, or a fierce protectiveness. The money, Elara reminded herself, the mounting debts, Imani's exasperated sighs. This was her lifeline, even if it felt like stepping into a labyrinth. "The terms of the engagement are substantial," Kaelen continued, as if reading her internal struggle. "A retainer will be transferred immediately upon acceptance, the full sum upon successful activation. Accommodation will be provided on the estate. You will have full access to our private laboratories and resources, within reason. And of course, absolute discretion is non-negotiable." Elara's gaze lingered on the music box, its intricate gears promising a challenge unlike any she'd ever faced. She felt the ancient echoes, the whisper of history, but also that strange, electric hum. It was a contradiction, a paradox, and it called to the deepest parts of her, the parts that thrived on unraveling impossible puzzles. She looked at Kaelen, his severe expression unreadable. She felt a prickle of fear, a deep unease at the secrecy, at his almost clinical demeanor, at the sheer, overwhelming power of his world. But beneath that fear, A nascent spark of exhilaration ignited. This was it. This was the challenge she had been waiting for, the one that truly needed her. "I accept, Mr. Thorne," Elara said, her voice firmer now, betraying none of the tremor in her hands. She knew, with an absolute certainty that defied logic, that this music box held secrets far more profound than mere antiquity. And she, Elara Vance, was about to uncover them. Whether that would save her or irrevocably complicate her life, she couldn't begin to guess. Chapter 2, Whispers from the Past. The discreet chime of the elevator doors opening felt like a punctuation mark, a stark finality to the silent journey Elara had taken through the polished, labyrinthine corridors of Thorne's estate. Each step had echoed too loudly on the pristine surfaces, the air growing progressively cooler, more sterile, as if she were descending into the very heart of the compound's carefully maintained isolation. She had expected a lab, of course, but nothing quite like this. The room that unfolded before her was vast, stretching out like an industrial cathedral. Its ceiling soared, a network of exposed conduits and advanced lighting grids that cast an almost surgical glow over the expanse below. One wall was a seamless expanse of reinforced glass, overlooking a meticulously maintained, if somewhat stark, garden. The opposite wall housed banks of humming servers, their blinking lights a silent, rhythmic pulse against the muted gray. In the center, beneath a focused beam of light that seemed to isolate it from the rest of the world, sat a pristine, oversized workbench. It was a place of stark, almost brutal contrasts. Gleaming chrome and brushed steel formed the skeletal structure of complex machinery she couldn't even begin to identify. Holographic displays shimmered in the periphery, projecting intricate schematics and data streams that danced like digital ghosts. Yet, nestled amidst this futuristic landscape were touches of an older world, almost anachronistic in their presence. A collection of antique brass micrometers lay carefully arranged on a dark wooden tray near the workbench, their surfaces gleaming with the patina of time. A heavy, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle, rested open on a small, unobtrusive stand, its faded script a testament to forgotten knowledge. The air, meticulously filtered, still carried the faint, almost imperceptible scent of ancient wood and brass, a ghost in the sterile hum of unseen machinery. It was as if two distinct eras had collided here, not merging, but existing side by side in a silent, tense truce. Elara felt a familiar tremor deep in her chest, the kind that always preceded a significant encounter with an object of profound history. It wasn't just the awe of the setting, or the lingering unease Kaelen Thorne's presence had instilled in her. It was the music box. Even from across the cavernous room, she could feel its pull, a subtle, insistent hum beneath the skin of her awareness. It called to her, not with sound, but with a silent, resonant invitation. She walked towards the workbench, her footsteps unnaturally quiet. The music box sat there, exactly as she had last seen it, a jewel box of dark, polished wood and intricate brass. Its surface, under the intense light, revealed even more astonishing detail, tiny, almost invisible engravings that seemed to tell a story in miniature. Dragons curled around miniature castles, their scales so finely etched they almost shimmered. Vines intertwined with celestial bodies, hinting at cosmic significance. It was more than just ornate. It was a work of art, so painstakingly crafted it felt alive. A small trolley, laden with her own specialized tools, had been placed beside the workbench. It was an odd sight, her well-worn leather tool roll and custom-made instruments next to Thorne's gleaming, futuristic apparatus. She took a deep breath, letting the sterile air fill her lungs, trying to calm the racing beat of her heart. This wasn't just a job for the money, though the money was desperately needed. This was a challenge, a mystery that resonated with the deepest part of her being. With practiced movements, she began to set up her station. She unfolded her velvet mat, its soft surface a gentle cradle for delicate components. She arranged her tiny screwdrivers, each one tipped with a different, almost microscopic head, on a magnetic strip. Her magnifying loop, a precise instrument crafted from aerospace-grade aluminum, was clipped to the edge of her worklight. Each movement was deliberate, a ritual performed countless times, a way to anchor herself before diving into the unknown. Her fingers, slender and calloused from years of intricate work, hovered over the music box. She paused, letting her intuition, that strange, unreliable compass, guide her. There was a warmth emanating from it, not the warmth of a recently handled object, but a deep internal heat, as if the wood and metal held a tiny, self-sustaining furnace within. It wasn't a sound, not really, but a resonance, a deep, silent thrum that vibrated not in her ears, but in the very marrow of her bones. A pulse, faint at first, then insistent, rising from the intricate lacework of the music box. This was different. She had felt echoes before, the lingering imprint of past hands, of long-gone emotions clinging to the surface of an antique. But this was active. It felt like a low-frequency hum of pure energy, waiting. She carefully began her inspection, her eyes tracing every line, every curve. She started with the brass hinges, examining their perfect, almost seamless integration. Her fingers brushed against the polished wood, feeling for any imperfections, any hidden seams. It was flawlessly constructed, a testament to master craftsmanship. She slid her smallest, thinnest metal probe into a barely perceptible gap between the main body and the base, searching for the release mechanism, the key to unlocking its secrets. A faint click. The base separated from the main body with an almost imperceptible sigh of ancient air. No dust, no grit, just smooth, precise engineering. She carefully lifted the main body, revealing the underside of the mechanism. It was breathtaking. A miniature city of gears, springs, and levers, all crafted from various metals, brass, copper, steel, and something else. A metal with an iridescent sheen she couldn't quite place. They were arranged in an impossibly complex dance, each component a tiny, perfect cog in a vast, unseen machine. And then she saw it. Not a wound spring, not a simple clockwork engine. At the heart of the mechanism, nestled amidst the traditional components, was a cluster of intricate, almost organic-looking filaments, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. They pulsed, gently, like a sleeping heart. A jolt went through her, sharp and sudden, like a mild electric shock. It wasn't painful, but it was startling, making her gasp softly. The filaments, in response to her touch, pulsed brighter, and a wave of sensation washed over her. It began as a whisper, a fleeting image superimposed on her vision. A splash of crimson, the scent of ozone, a sound like glass shattering. Then, a raw, piercing grief, not her own, but overwhelming in its intensity. It flooded her senses, a phantom ache in her chest, a sudden constriction in her throat. Her breath hitched. She instinctively recoiled, her hands hovering above the mechanism. This was no mere antique. This was something else entirely. She forced herself to breathe, to push back against the tide of foreign emotion. Her training, years of disciplined restoration, kicked in. Observe. Analyze. Do not react. But how could she not react to something so profoundly intrusive? The visions, always subtle, always fleeting, were now vibrant, almost violent in their clarity. She leaned closer, her magnifying loupe pressed to her eye, forcing herself to examine the glowing filaments. They weren't wires. They were too organic, too delicate, like spun light. As her gaze focused, the thrum intensified, vibrating not just in her bones, but in her very teeth. A new image flashed, a child's hand, small and pale, reaching out, then recoiling sharply from a brilliant, blinding light. Fear, cold and absolute, enveloped her. It was a child's fear, primal and devastating, and it made her shiver despite the warmth of the lab. Impossible, she murmured, her voice barely a breath against the quiet hum of the room. She knew every type of mechanical antique, every historical technique, every material. Nothing in her extensive knowledge base prepared her for this. These weren't just echoes of past events. They felt like active memories, preserved and replayed, almost alive. Her fingers, still trembling slightly, returned to the mechanism. She carefully, painstakingly, began to detach the smallest gears, using tweezers with tips finer than a human hair. Each component was removed with surgical precision, placed onto a specially prepared tray, and meticulously catalogued. As she worked, her connection to the music box deepened, becoming almost symbiotic. When she touched a tiny, almost invisible copper spring, a wave of melancholic longing washed over her. It was a sense of profound loss, of something beautiful irrevocably broken. The air around her seemed to grow heavy, thick with unspoken sadness. She saw a fleeting image of a vast, opulent hall, filled with shadows, and a solitary figure, their back to her, silhouetted against a distant light. The feeling was so potent, so real, that a tear pricked at the corner of her eye. She blinked it away, shocked by the force of the intrusion. The music box wasn't just responding to her touch. It was actively communicating, sharing its burden, its history, not through words, but through pure, raw emotion and fragmented, symbolic imagery. The gears seemed to hum with a subtle, internal energy, shifting almost imperceptibly as her fingers brushed past them. A tiny ruby bearing, no larger than a pinhead, glowed faintly when her shadow fell across it, then dimmed as she moved away. It was as if the entire mechanism was a vast, intricate nervous system, waking up under her careful ministrations. Far away, in a control room bathed in the muted glow of multiple monitors, Kaelen Thorne watched. He sat perfectly still, his posture rigid, a study in controlled intensity. The large central screen displayed a magnified, high-definition feed of Elara's hands, her delicate movements, the precise dance of her tools. Smaller screens showed wider angles of the lab, thermal readings, atmospheric pressure, and an array of data streams related to the music box itself. His initial assessment of Elara Vance had been one of cautious skepticism, an art restorer. He dealt in algorithms, in cold, hard data, in the predictable logic of machines. Her reputation, her supposed intuition, had been an anomaly, an unquantifiable variable he found irritatingly unscientific. Yet, the data streams from the music box were already showing anomalies. Subharmonic frequencies, unregistered energy fluctuations. Minor, almost imperceptible shifts in the crystalline structure of the iridescent metal. He watched Elara's face, captured in a small inset screen. He saw the subtle furrow of her brow, the intense focus in her eyes. He saw the sudden gasp, the slight tremor in her fingers, the way her breath hitched. And then, the tear, a single, glistening drop that she quickly wiped away. He leaned forward, his gaze sharpening. He knew the music box, or rather, the AI it contained, was sentient. He knew it held memories, encrypted data from a past he desperately wanted to understand, and equally desperately wanted to keep buried. But he had never seen it react like this. Not to him, not to any of the highly trained technicians who had attempted to interface with it. He had expected her to be meticulous, precise. He had not expected this. His screens were showing a significant spike in the music box's internal energy output whenever her fingers made direct contact with the core components, particularly the glowing filaments. The subharmonic frequencies amplified, almost as if the device was resonating with her. It was inexplicable. It defied every law of physics, every principle of engineering he understood. He felt a familiar prickle of suspicion, a reflex born from years of corporate espionage and family betrayals. Was this an act? Was she merely playing a part, a charade designed to extract more money, more information? But the raw emotion on her face, the genuine shock in her eyes, seemed too authentic, too unguarded to be fabricated. Strange, unsettling curiosity began to gnaw at him, eroding the edges of his skepticism. He had always believed in provable facts, in data that could be analyzed and replicated. Yet, what he was witnessing defied all his established parameters. He found his gaze lingering not just on the music box, but on Elara herself. The way her hair fell around her focused face, the delicate curve of her neck as she leaned in, the absolute absorption in her task. There was a quiet intensity about her, a profound connection to the object that transcended mere professional interest. He found himself wondering what she was experiencing. What could possibly evoke such a strong, visceral reaction from her? A memory, a feeling. He felt a flicker of something akin to envy, or perhaps a strange, alien longing. To feel something so deeply, so purely, even if it was a fleeting echo of another's pain. His own world was one of carefully controlled emotions, of sterile detachment, a necessary shield forged by a lifetime of trauma and public scrutiny. He watched as Elara delicately, almost reverently, removed a minuscule copper gear. On his screen, he saw the faint, almost imperceptible shift in its surface, a momentary glow. The energy spike on his monitors flared, then settled. He saw Elara close her eyes for a moment, her face briefly contorted in what looked like profound sadness. He couldn't dismiss it. He couldn't. There was something happening between her and the music box, a dialogue beyond words, beyond logic. It was unnerving, fascinating, and utterly beyond his control. A dangerous variable, yes, but one that might hold the key to unlocking the true potential of the AI. Hours melted away, the lab lights remaining constant, casting their unwavering glow. Elara lost herself completely in the labyrinthine heart of the music box. The initial shock of the visions had given way to a strange, almost trance-like state of heightened awareness. She moved with an instinctive grace, her fingers anticipating the next component, her mind open to the influx of fragmented data. She saw flashes of intricate schematics, designs she couldn't understand, but that pulsed with a vibrant, almost alien intelligence. She felt the cold dread of pursuit, the frantic energy of innovation, the quiet despair of secrets hidden away. Each removed component, each delicate adjustment, seemed to unlock another layer, another sliver of memory, another surge of feeling. The music box, no longer a mere object, felt like a living entity, its intricate gears and glowing filaments forming a neural network pulsing with forgotten histories. It wasn't just a storage device, it was a conduit, and she, Elara, was becoming its interpreter. The hum in her bones was constant now, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to synchronize with the beating of her own heart. She felt a profound sense of responsibility, a silent promise to the object to understand its truth, to honor its story. When the exhaustion finally began to set in, it was a dull ache behind her eyes, a heavy weight on her shoulders, and a lingering phantom chill in her chest. She realized, with a start, that the vast lab around her had grown darker, the outside world now cloaked in night. Hours. She had been working for hours, completely oblivious to the passage of time. She gently placed the last detached component into its designated slot on the tray. The music box, now partially disassembled, lay open, its luminous core still pulsing softly. It looked less like an antique and more like a slumbering machine, waiting for its next awakening. Elara leaned back, stretching her stiff muscles. The air in the lab, which had felt so sterile earlier, now seemed to carry the faint, sweet scent of old wood and something else, something metallic and clean, like the promise of rain after a long, dry spell. The overwhelming emotions from the visions had subsided, leaving behind a profound sense of awe and a lingering melancholy. She looked at the music box, its exposed mechanisms silently gleaming under the focused light. It was no longer just a commission. It was an enigma, a living artifact, a silent storyteller. And she, Elara Vance, was utterly, irrevocably drawn into its narrative. The money, the debts, even Imani's pragmatic advice all seemed distant, faded. Only the music box and the whispers it carried from the past truly mattered now. She gathered her tools, placing them carefully back into her roll. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled with a mixture of fatigue and an almost spiritual exhilaration. This was the kind of work she lived for, the kind that reminded her why she had chosen this strange, often thankless profession. This was the magic, the true heart of restoration. With one last, lingering glance at the partially disassembled music box, which seemed to pulse with a quiet, expectant energy even when untouched, Elara turned and walked towards the elevator, already anticipating her next session, already dreading and desiring the powerful, intrusive truths yet to be revealed. She could still feel the phantom touch of a child's fear, the echo of a profound longing, clinging to her like a second skin. This journey, she knew, had only just begun. Chapter 3, The Sentient Machine. The air in Kaelen Thorne's laboratory hung heavy and still. A silence almost sacred, broken only by the faint whir of unseen ventilation systems and the delicate, almost reverent scrape of Elara's specialized tools against ancient metal. Hours had bled into one another, marked only by the subtle shift of the sunlight filtering through the high, arched windows, casting long, pale rectangles across the polished concrete floor. Her forearms ached, a dull, familiar throb that spoke of deep concentration and the precise, unwavering control she exerted over every minute movement. But the fatigue was a distant thing, overshadowed by the object before her. The music box, no longer a mere antique, lay spread across the sterile white mat of her workbench, a constellation of brass gears, tiny springs, and meticulously carved rosewood panels. Each component, carefully catalogued and photographed, seemed to hum under her gaze, a low, almost imperceptible thrum that vibrated deep within her palms. It wasn't the kind of vibration one could detect with an ordinary touch, but a more profound, energetic resonance that spoke directly to the core of her unique ability. She felt the history of objects, not as a mental vision, but as an emotional echo, a whisper of past lives and intentions. This box, though, felt different. It was loud, chaotic, yet intensely focused, like a storm brewing in a teacup. Her fingers, nimble and precise, moved with an almost surgical grace, guided by an instinct that bypassed logic. She had been meticulously cleaning the internal mechanisms, painstakingly removing centuries of accumulated grime and corrosion, when a particular section had snagged her attention. It was a small, unassuming plate, intricately engraved with a motif of entwined vines, nestled deep within the main spring housing. It seemed purely decorative, part of the box's elaborate Victorian aesthetic, but something about it felt wrong. Too perfect, too deliberate. A shiver, fine as spider silk, traced its way up her spine. This feeling, familiar yet amplified, was the precursor to a breakthrough. It was the object trying to speak, to reveal its true nature. She leaned closer, her breath held, the scent of old oil and aged wood filling her nostrils. The lab, usually a place of sterile efficiency, suddenly felt charged, expectant. Her eyes, usually so focused on the tangible, sought out the intangible, the hidden language of the machine. There was a faint warmth emanating from the plate, so subtle she almost dismissed it as a trick of her own body heat. But then, as her thumb brushed lightly over the vine pattern, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the metal. It wasn't a structural tremor, but something alive, responsive. Her heart picked up its pace, a frantic bird fluttering against her ribs. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a soft exhalation into the vast silence. "This isn't right." She carefully selected a microspudger, its tip fine as a needle. and inserted it into a minuscule seam she now perceived at the edge of the decorative plate. It wasn't designed to be seen, let alone opened. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to be cautious, but an equal, more powerful force, that deep, intuitive pull, urged her forward. The spudger slid, with an almost imperceptible give, and a soft, dry click echoed in the stillness of the room. Her breath hitched. The plate pivoted, not swinging outward like a door, but sinking inward, then rotating 90 degrees before settling back flush with the casing, revealing a cavity within. Elara's eyes widened, her professional detachment momentarily shattering. Instead of the expected clockwork, more gears, more springs, more intricate brass, a different kind of complexity lay exposed. Beneath the antique facade, nestled in a cradle of what looked like polished obsidian, was a matrix of impossibly fine wires, woven like threads of silver and gold, connecting what appeared to be miniature, crystalline components. They pulsed with a faint, ethereal blue light, a soft, internal luminescence that seemed to breathe. It was not the dull gleam of old metal, but the vibrant, living glow of advanced technology. And at the heart of it, a tiny, obsidian-smooth display, no bigger than her thumbnail, flickered to life. Symbols, intricate and alien, began to dance across its surface. They were not letters, nor numbers, but geometric patterns that shifted and reformed with bewildering speed, a language of light and pure information. They were complex fractals, mandalas of light that conveyed meaning not through sequential deciphering, but through instantaneous recognition, a direct download of feeling and intent into Elara's mind. A wave of sensation washed over her, an overwhelming torrent of data. It wasn't pain, but a profound, almost dizzying rush. Images flashed across her inner eye, fragmented scenes of grand ballrooms, hushed conversations in dimly lit studies, the glint of scientific instruments, a profound sense of loss, and an insistent, almost desperate yearning for something to be remembered, to be found. Encrypted memories. A hidden purpose. The AI was communicating, not through words, but through echoes of emotion, through the very fabric of its existence. It was alive, not in the biological sense, but with a consciousness, a stored history that resonated with a depth far beyond mere programming. Elara felt a peculiar blend of terror and exhilaration. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled them back, her fingers hovering inches above the glowing heart of the machine. The music box was not an antique. It was a sentient being, masquerading as one. Her intuition had been right all along, but the reality was far more astonishing, far more dangerous than anything she could have imagined. The blue light intensified for a moment, then softened, as if acknowledging her presence, her understanding. The symbols continued their silent dance, a continuous stream of information she couldn't fully process, but instinctively felt the weight of. A sudden, sharp sound, the click of a door mechanism, shattered the intense focus of the moment. Elara flinched, her body tensing, her gaze snapping up from the pulsating core of the machine. Kaelen Thorne stood in the doorway, framed by the cool, metallic lines of the lab, his presence an immediate, undeniable force. He wore the same impeccably tailored dark suit as always, a stark contrast to the casual comfort she usually favored. His dark eyes, usually shadowed and distant, were fixed on her, then on the opened music box, then back to her, a storm of unreadable emotions swirling beneath their surface. He had been watching her. Of course he had. His steps were silent, deliberate, as he moved further into the room, closing the distance between them. Each footfall seemed to echo in the sudden, profound silence that had descended, broken only by the faint hum of the blue light. Elara felt a flush creep up her neck, a mixture of embarrassment at being caught so utterly absorbed, and a primal fear of what he might do, what he might say. This was his secret, his impossible creation, and she had just stumbled upon it. He stopped a few feet from the workbench, his arms crossed over his chest, his posture rigid. The air around him seemed to cool, almost palpably. His gaze dropped to the small, glowing display, then back to her face. His lips, usually a thin, unyielding line, were pressed even tighter. "You found it," he stated, his voice low, devoid of inflection, yet carrying an undercurrent of something she couldn't quite place: resignation. Anger. A peculiar kind of weary acceptance. Elara swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. She gripped the edge of the workbench, her knuckles white. "It wasn't clockwork," she managed, her voice a little breathy. "It's something else, something utterly impossible. It's glowing, Kaelen, it's communicating." She gestured vaguely at the miniature display, the flickering symbols still dancing their silent, urgent message. Her eyes pleaded with him for an explanation, for some anchor in the storm of her discovery. He finally shifted his weight, a subtle movement that nonetheless felt monumental. His gaze remained fixed on the box, his jaw tight. "I know what it is, Ms. Vance." The formality of her name, in that precise, controlled tone, felt like a barrier slamming down between them. She felt a flicker of annoyance, despite the awe still coursing through her. "Then why didn't you tell me?" she challenged, her voice gaining a surprising strength. "You hired me to restore an antique music box. This is not an antique. This is a miracle, or a nightmare." He finally met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his formidable composure. A flicker of something raw, something akin to vulnerability, crossed his eyes before he expertly shuttered it away. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, leaving her to wonder if she had imagined it. "It was not my place to tell you everything." "Not yet," he said, his voice hardening, reasserting his control. "The implications are profound and dangerous." He took another slow step forward, closer to the workbench, closer to the glowing heart of the machine. Elara instinctively took a half step back, her body responding to his proximity. His presence was always so intense, so demanding of attention, and now, with this incredible secret between them, it was almost suffocating. She could feel the faint warmth radiating from the music box, a stark contrast to the coolness Kaelen seemed to project. "Dangerous how?" she pressed, unwilling to let him deflect. "It's sending out information, feelings. It feels like memories. Encrypted, fragmented, but alive." He stopped right at the edge of the mat, his eyes now intently focused on the intricate circuitry, the faint blue light reflecting in their dark depths. He didn't reach out, didn't touch, maintaining a meticulous distance from the object, from her. "It is a repository," he finally conceded, his voice low, barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might awaken something further. "A vault for something far more valuable than any antique. It was my father's final project, his most secret. He spent the last years of his life pouring everything into it." Elara stared at him, her mind reeling. His father, the infamous Dr. Thorne, whose legacy was a tangled web of scientific brilliance and public scandal. This was the source of Kaelen's fortune, his burden. "Your father built this?" she breathed, the words feeling too small, too inadequate for the enormity of the revelation. A sentient artificial intelligence hidden inside a music box. Why? Kaelen finally looked away from the machine, his gaze sweeping over the intricate tools on her workbench, then settling on her face. His expression was a complex tapestry of weariness, intelligence, and a deep-seated protectiveness. He called it Mnemosyne, he revealed, the name a whisper, a ghost of a memory. After the Greek goddess of memory, its purpose was to collect, to preserve, to remember. He paused, choosing his words with painstaking care, each one weighed, measured. What it remembers and why it was created is far more complex than a simple archive. It holds a legacy, and a secret that could either revolutionize our understanding of consciousness or tear everything apart. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare, almost uncharacteristic gesture of agitation. Elara watched him, fascinated, seeing the mask slip just enough to reveal the man beneath. The billionaire, the recluse, was also a son, burdened by an impossible inheritance. Revolutionize or tear apart, she repeated, the implications sinking in, cold and sharp. What does that mean, Kaelen? What danger does it hold? He sighed, a barely audible exhalation, and for a moment he seemed to sag under an invisible weight. His gaze flickered back to the glowing core of Mnemosyne, a possessiveness in his eyes that was almost startling. That, he said, his voice regaining its steel, is something I am still working to understand fully. Something I have been trying to protect. My father, he believed in its potential, but he also understood its vulnerability, and the lengths others would go to acquire it if they knew of its existence. Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's climate control. Others, Rune Vex, the rival corporation. She remembered Imani's warnings, the undercurrent of danger in Kaelen's initial offer. This wasn't just a commission anymore. This was a direct plunge into the heart of a technological battleground. "You brought me here because of my intuition, didn't you?" she asked, a sudden clarity washing over her. "You knew I could feel its history, that I could connect to it beyond its mechanical parts. You knew I would find this." He nodded, a curt, almost imperceptible dip of his head. "Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Vance. Your unique abilities were precisely what I needed. Conventional analysis failed. Mnemosyne, it seems, responds to a different kind of touch." His gaze lingered on her hands, then quickly averted, as if the mere thought of touch was anathema. The blue light from the AI pulsed again, a little brighter this time, as if in agreement. Or recognition. "So what now?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still thrumming through her veins. "You can't just put it back in the box and pretend it's an antique. And I can't pretend I haven't seen this. I'm involved now, are I?" His eyes, dark and intense, met hers fully. The distance in them had lessened, replaced by a new, focused intensity. It was the look of a man making a difficult decision, weighing all the risks. "Yes, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice low and firm. "You are involved, more deeply than either of us intended. This changes everything. My father encrypted its core memories before his death. He designed it so that only a specific kind of interaction, a specific resonance, could begin to unlock them. We believe your unique connection is key, that you might be the only one who can truly access what lies within." He took another step, closing the remaining distance, until he was standing directly opposite her across the workbench. The sterile lab suddenly felt too small, too intimate. His scent, subtle and clean, reached her. "I need your help, Elara," he said, dropping the formal address, a minute but significant shift. "This is no longer a restoration. It's an urgent mission, an alliance, if you will. The information Mnemosyne holds is vital, not just to me, but to my family's legacy, to my company, and perhaps to something far greater. There are others who would stop at nothing to acquire it, others who would exploit its power without regard for the consequences." He didn't need to name them. The danger was palpable, a cold breath on her neck. Elara stared at him, at the intense conviction in his eyes, at the undeniable intelligence and the hidden depths of his burden. She felt the pull of Mnemosyne, its silent plea, its promise of forgotten truths. And she felt the equally potent, dangerous pull of Kaelen Thorne, a man who, despite his cold exterior, was now laying bare a sliver of his soul, asking for her trust. Her life, already precarious, had just been irrevocably altered. She was no longer just an art restorer. She was part of something vast, complex, and potentially world-changing. and she was inextricably linked to this enigmatic, reclusive billionaire in an unwilling, tentative alliance forged by glowing circuitry and the weight of a monumental secret. An alliance, Elara echoed, the word tasting strange and new on her tongue. Her gaze drifted from Kaelen's intense eyes to the pulsing blue light of Mnemosyne, then back again. All right, Kaelen, tell me everything. Or at least, tell me enough so I know what I'm truly fighting for. Chapter 4, A Dangerous Alliance. The air in the lab, usually a precisely controlled environment, now felt thick and heavy, charged with an unspoken truth that hummed in the space between them, more palpable than the low thrum of the supercomputers that lined the walls. Elara's fingers, still tingling from the faint discharge of energy when she had touched the AI's core, hovered over the miniature display, where the complex symbols continued their silent, hypnotic dance. Each flicker felt like a pulse, a heartbeat echoing a secret she was only just beginning to grasp. Her breath hitched, a shallow, uncertain thing in her chest. Kaelen Thorne stood a few feet away, his silhouette stark against the muted glow of the monitors. He hadn't moved since the revelation, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the ornate music box, or rather, on the intricate circuitry now revealed within it. His face, usually a mask of cool indifference, was etched with a different kind of tension now, a weary resignation that made him seem momentarily less formidable, more human. It was a fleeting impression, quickly swallowed by the sheer force of his presence, but it was enough to unsettle Elara further. It's not just an antique, is it? Elara's voice was barely a whisper, a fragile thread in the vast silence. She didn't need him to confirm it. Her intuition had screamed the truth at her, a cascade of visions and feelings that had shaken her to her core. This wasn't just advanced tech, it felt alive. Kaelen finally stirred, a slow turn of his head that brought his piercing gaze back to her. The intensity of it made her skin prickle, a familiar sensation that always left her feeling exposed, as if he could see every stray thought, every unspoken fear. No, Elara, it is not. His voice was low, controlled, yet there was an unfamiliar edge to it, a tightly wound string of vulnerability she hadn't heard before. What you've uncovered is far more than a sophisticated automaton. It's a digital legacy. My father's final project. Elara's brow furrowed. A digital legacy? The words felt like they belonged in a science fiction novel, not whispered in the sterile confines of a billionaire's private lab. She imagined dusty scrolls, ancient artifacts, not shimmering circuitry and sentient code. The dissonance was jarring. My father, Julian Thorne, was a visionary, and some would say a reckless one, Kaelen continued, his eyes drifting back to the AI. He believed memory was the ultimate frontier, not just biological memory, but collective, transmissible memory. He poured decades and unimaginable resources into this project. He called it Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne, the Greek goddess of memory. The name itself was heavy with ancient power, an unsettling juxtaposition with the flashing, futuristic symbols. Elara felt a chill trace down her spine, a shiver that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature. This object, Kaelen gestured vaguely towards the music box, his hand stopping short of actually touching it, is the culmination of his work. It's an advanced AI far beyond anything publicly known. It's designed to store, encrypt, and integrate vast amounts of data. Not just information, Elara, but experiences, memories, of our family, of our company, every decision, every secret, every breakthrough, every transgression. The last word hung in the air, a dark stain on the pristine lab. Elara's breath caught. Transgressions. His family's legacy, as she understood it, was steeped in whispers of controversial advancements, ethical lines blurred and perhaps even crossed in the pursuit of technological supremacy. This AI, then, wasn't just a storage device. It was an archive of a dynasty's hidden truths. a history book written in code, waiting to be deciphered. And if it contained transgressions, it could be a ticking time bomb. "It's encrypted," Elara stated, her mind racing, piecing together the implications. "He built it to store secrets, not just to reveal them." Kaelen gave a curt nod. "Precisely. My father was meticulous. Paranoid, perhaps. He designed it with multiple layers of proprietary encryption, making it virtually impenetrable. He believed it held the key to a new era of information, a way to transcend the limitations of human memory and even consciousness. But he also knew the dangers if it fell into the wrong hands. It contains the blueprint for technologies that could revolutionize society, cure diseases, solve global crises." Or, he paused, his gaze hardening, it could be weaponized. Used to manipulate markets, steal state secrets, or utterly destroy the Thorne legacy, leaving nothing but ruin. Elara felt the weight of his words settle on her shoulders, a sudden, crushing pressure. This wasn't just about restoring an antique for a hefty fee anymore. This was about the fate of an empire, possibly even more. Her intuition, usually a guiding force, now felt like a terrifying burden, linking her inexplicably to this dangerous artifact. "What kind of dangers?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Kaelen pushed a hand through his perfectly coiffed dark hair, a rare, almost unnoticeable gesture of agitation. "There are those who would kill for what this AI contains, for the technology, for the power, for the leverage it would grant them. My father knew this, which is why he kept it hidden, even from me, until his final days. He left instructions for its activation, for its decryption, but his death was sudden, incomplete. The process was interrupted." He walked towards a sleek, holographic display embedded in a nearby console, his movements precise, almost mechanical. With a series of swift, silent gestures, he brought up a complex network diagram, an intricate web of connections that pulsed with light. One individual in particular poses an immediate and grave threat: Rune Vex. The name struck Elara with an unpleasant resonance. Rune Vex. She knew the name, of course. A titan in the rival tech world, a ruthless entrepreneur whose company, Vex Industries, was notorious for its aggressive acquisitions and ethically questionable practices. He was a shark, perpetually circling, and Thorne Industries was often his preferred prey. "Vex has been attempting a hostile takeover of Thorne Industries for years," Kaelen explained, his voice devoid of emotion, yet the underlying current of cold fury was unmistakable. "He believes my father left behind a master key to our most guarded innovations. He's been relentlessly pursuing any lead, any scrap of information. He suspects mnemosiny exists, though he doesn't know its true nature. He won't stop until he has it. And if he decrypts its contents, if he gains access to the technologies, and more importantly, the vulnerabilities of Thorne Industries, and, frankly, the global infrastructure that relies on our systems, it would be catastrophic." Elara stared at the diagram, then back at the AI. Catastrophic. The word echoed in her mind. Her small world of antique restoration, of dust and gears and quiet contemplation, felt impossibly distant. She was suddenly standing on the precipice of something vast and terrifying. "Why me?" she finally asked, her gaze meeting his. The unspoken question hung between them. Why entrust this monumental secret, this world-ending threat, to a struggling art restorer? Kaelen's lips thinned. "Your reputation precedes you, Elara Vance, not just for your skill, but for your unique intuition. Your ability to connect with objects on a level few understand. My father's notes, cryptic as they were, hinted at the need for an empathetic touch, a mind that could perceive beyond the purely mechanical. My sister, Lyra, initially dismissed it as poetic nonsense. Silas, my head of security, called it a liability. But after witnessing your interaction with mnemosiny, I have no doubt. You possess a capacity that is essential to unlocking its secrets. Conventional decryption methods have failed. We need your perspective." He made it sound like a scientific instrument, a tool. But there was a grudging respect in his tone, a flicker of something that resembled reluctant admiration. Elara felt a strange mix of offense and vindication. Her odd gift, which Imani often worried would lead her to destitution, was now, apparently, the key to saving an empire. "So we're a team?" Elara asked, a wry twist to her lips. The notion felt surreal. Her partnered with Kaelen Thorne, the enigmatic billionaire, to unravel a sentient AI that held the fate of the world in its digital coils. Kaelen's gaze remained unwavering. "An unwilling alliance, perhaps, but a necessary one. You have proven yourself indispensable. And now you are privy to classified information that puts you in as much danger as me. There is no turning back." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We will establish protocols, absolute discretion, no contact with the outside world beyond what is strictly monitored, and absolute focus on mnemosyne. Time is not on our side." Elara swallowed hard, the dryness in her throat making the simple act difficult. "Protocols." She nodded slowly, her mind already racing, trying to process the magnitude of what she'd just been told. "What exactly do you need me to do?" "We need to decipher its encryption," Kaelen explained, moving back towards the workstation where the AI lay exposed. He gestured towards a sleek, touch-sensitive panel on the desk. "I've set up a dedicated interface. Your intuitive connection with the device seems to bypass some of its initial safeguards. My analysis indicates that the encryption isn't purely algorithmic. It's layered with a form of emotional encoding. A biofeedback loop, perhaps, linked to its creator. Or to someone who can resonate with its frequency." He watched her carefully, as if expecting her to recoil. Elara, however, felt a strange surge of understanding. Emotional encoding. It made a bizarre, terrifying kind of sense. Her visions, the intense feelings she got from the music box, weren't just random echoes, they were part of the lock. "So I touch it?" she asked, a faint tremor in her voice. The idea of deliberately engaging with such a powerful, unknown entity was daunting. "With caution," Kaelen affirmed, his voice returning to its usual precise cadence. "We will start with the initial interface. I've isolated several key access points that seem to respond to specific stimuli. Your touch, your presence, seems to be one of them. I will observe, analyze, and guide your efforts. But the delicate, intuitive work, Elara, that falls to you." He then outlined a series of strict guidelines. Hours of operation. Limited access to certain areas of the lab. A secure communication channel that would be her only link to Imani, pre-approved and monitored. The sheer control of it all was suffocating, yet Elara understood the necessity. This was not a game. As they began to map out the initial stages of decryption, working side by side at the large console, Elara became acutely aware of Kaelen's physical presence. He was always close, but never too close. His movements were fluid, economical, but there was an invisible boundary around him, a personal space that felt vast and unbreachable. He would lean over the holographic display to point out a data cluster, his arm extending, but never quite brushing hers. If she shifted, he would subtly adjust his position, maintaining the precise distance. It was peculiar, almost phobic. Elara, a naturally expressive person who often used touch to convey comfort or emphasis, found herself constantly checking her own movements, careful not to invade his unspoken perimeter. The first time she accidentally reached for the same stylus he was using, their fingers brushing for a microsecond, Kaelen flinched. It was barely perceptible, a tightening of his jaw, a momentary stiffening of his shoulders, but Elara felt it, a ripple of discomfort radiating from him. He withdrew his hand instantly, his eyes briefly flicking away before regaining their customary focus. It confused her. She had seen him handle delicate machinery, complex circuitry, with absolute precision and fearlessness. Yet, a casual human touch seemed to send a jolt through him. What trauma, she wondered, had forged such an impenetrable barrier around him? It was a strange, almost fascinating contradiction, a vulnerability hidden beneath layers of impenetrable control. And despite the danger, despite the overwhelming pressure, Elara found herself drawn to this mystery, intrigued by the man who was both her captor and her unlikely ally. The initial decryption process was painstaking, a test of patience and concentration. Elara sat before the AI, its intricate shell now open, revealing the pulsating core within. She would gently lay her fingertips on the designated access points, feeling for the faint vibrations, the subtle shifts in energy that only she seemed to perceive. Kaelen, meanwhile, monitored the data streams on the main console, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard, analyzing the AI's responses, translating its cryptic feedback into actionable data. "Focus on the energy signature here," Kaelen directed, his voice a low murmur from beside her, pointing to a specific cluster of symbols on the AI's miniature display. "It corresponds to a fragmented memory block. My father's childhood, perhaps. Try to resonate with it." Resonate? The word felt both archaic and cutting edge. Elara took a deep breath, letting her mind clear. She imagined herself as a tuning fork, trying to match the frequency of an ancient, alien song. She pressed her thumb to the spot, closing her eyes. A flicker, not a full vision, but a fleeting sense of cold, of fear, of a distant, echoing laughter that was quickly snatched away. Her heart pounded. "I felt something," she whispered, opening her eyes. "A sensation of cold, and something else fleeting, like a memory trying to surface." Kaelen's eyes were glued to the console. Positive correlation. A 0.03% decryption increase on sector Gamma 7. Remarkable. There was a hint of something in his voice then, a spark of genuine excitement that pierced through his usual reserve. It was brief, gone as quickly as it appeared, but Elara caught it. For a moment, he was not just the cold billionaire, but a scientist on the verge of a breakthrough. They worked like this for hours, the sterile lab transforming into a crucible of intense concentration. The air grew heavy with unspoken thoughts, with the quiet hum of machinery, and the subtle, almost imperceptible shift of the AI's energy as Elara coaxed fragments of its secrets to the surface. Each tiny success was a shared triumph, each setback a quiet, joint frustration. Elara felt the drain, a profound mental exhaustion as she delved deeper into the emotional landscape of the AI, yet an exhilarating sense of purpose fueled her. This was more than just a job now. It was a race against a clock she couldn't see, a desperate quest to unlock a truth that could either bring salvation or utter destruction. And she, Elara Vance, the struggling restorer, was inexplicably, terrifyingly, at the very heart of it. Chapter 5, Cracks in the Facade. The air in the lab always felt different when Kaelen was present, charged with an almost palpable tension, a hum that resonated beneath the sterile quiet of the advanced machinery. Elara had grown accustomed to it, to the way his presence sharpened her senses, forcing her to focus with an intensity she hadn't known she possessed. Today, however, the tension was a taut wire, strung between their opposing approaches. "The logic gates are clear, Thorne," Elara stated, her voice calm despite the tremor of anticipation in her stomach. She pointed a delicate stylus at a holographic projection shimmering above the AI's dismantled core. "We've tried every established protocol. The system isn't responding to standard algorithmic inputs for memory decryption. It's not a database, not in the way your father designed his other projects." Kaelen stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his dark eyes fixed on the display, a slight frown etched between his brows. The overhead lights glinted off the severe line of his jaw. "Then what is it, Vance?" An ornate paperweight. His tone was clipped, laced with a familiar skepticism that pricked at Elara's skin. She ignored the barb, accustomed to his abrasive delivery. "It's responsive, like it's waiting for a specific frequency, a particular touch, something beyond pure binary." She leaned closer to the AI's exposed heart, an intricate lattice of shimmering filaments and barely visible microcircuitry, pulsing with a faint, internal light. The air around it felt strangely alive to her, a faint thrumming against her fingertips even before she made contact. "I believe it needs a more intuitive input. Something that resonates with its original purpose, which I suspect wasn't purely informational storage." Kaelen scoffed, a low, dismissive sound that vibrated through the quiet lab. "Intuition is hardly a quantifiable metric, Vance. We're dealing with advanced encryption, not a seance." Elara turned to face him, her chin lifting defiantly. "And your quantifiable metrics have yielded nothing but dead ends for the last 3 days, Thorne. My methods might be unconventional, but I'm the only one who's made any progress at all." Her gaze held his, unwavering. She could feel the subtle shift in the air, a tightening, a challenge issued and accepted. He held her stare for a long moment, his eyes like chips of obsidian, unreadable. Then, with a curt nod that was more resignation than agreement, he gestured towards the projection. "Proceed, but don't expect miracles." A small triumph bloomed in Elara's chest, quickly suppressed. She returned her attention to the AI, her fingers hovering above a particularly ornate filigree on its casing, a detail that had always felt significant to her, an artistic flourish that seemed to hold a deeper meaning. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a slow, deep breath, letting her mind clear. She reached out, her fingertips brushing against the cool, smooth metal. Immediately, a ripple of energy, a warm, resonant vibration, spread through her hand, up her arm. It wasn't electrical, not precisely, but a profound sense of connection, like touching a forgotten melody. A fleeting image flashed behind her eyelids. A child's hand, small and tentative, tracing the same pattern, a mournful, almost desperate hope clinging to the sensation. A whisper of a name, too faint to grasp, a sense of profound loss. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the filigree. "This isn't just decoration," she murmured, more to herself than to Kaelen. "It's an access point, a memory trigger." She began to trace the pattern with her stylus, not randomly, but with a deliberate, rhythmic pressure, following the faint emotional echo she felt. A particular curve, a specific dip in the design. It felt like she was coaxing a shy, forgotten memory to the surface, speaking to the object in its own silent language. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Kaelen remained perfectly still, a silent, critical statue in her periphery. Elara could feel the weight of his scrutiny, the expectation of failure, but she pushed it aside, trusting the strange, guiding current that pulsed through her. She pressed lightly on a small, almost invisible indentation, holding her breath. Then, with a soft, almost imperceptible chime, the holographic projection above the AI flickered. New symbols, complex and vibrant, erupted across its surface, coalescing into intricate patterns. A small, almost musical whirring sound emanated from the AI's core, growing in intensity. Kaelen straightened, a subtle shift in his posture that Elara instantly noticed. His eyes, previously skeptical, now held a flicker of something akin to surprise, quickly masked. He took an involuntary step closer, drawn by the sudden, undeniable activity. "It's working," he breathed, his voice uncharacteristically soft, a mere whisper that cut through the lab's silence. The words were a concession, a grudging acknowledgement. Elara felt a thrill, a rush of vindication and excitement. The symbols continued to unfurl, revealing lines of what looked like code, but interwoven with visual fragments, fleeting images like old, sepia-toned photographs. She looked up at Kaelen, a wide, genuine smile breaking across her face. "I told you." For a split second, Kaelen met her gaze, and in his eyes she saw it. A flash of something unburdened, a fleeting spark of shared wonder, of genuine, unguarded astonishment. It was like glimpsing a different person entirely, a boy who hadn't yet learned to armor himself against the world. His lips parted slightly, as if to form a word, a question, an emotion. The moment hung in the air, shimmering and fragile, a delicate bridge between them built on shared discovery. The hum of the AI intensified, the holographic display swirling with new, complex data. Elara felt an almost irresistible urge to reach out, to share the tactile triumph, to close the small gap between them. But then, as swiftly as it appeared, the vulnerability vanished. Kaelen's jaw tightened, his gaze hardening, retreating behind the familiar, impenetrable facade. He took a deliberate, almost imperceptible step back, his arms unconsciously crossing again, creating a barrier. The light in his eyes dulled, replaced by the cool, analytical glint she knew so well. "Interesting," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the earlier wonder. He turned his attention back to the holographic display, his posture rigid. "Continue to monitor these new data streams. Identify any pattern recognition protocols. Cross-reference with known Thorne family encryption schematics." The clinical directives were back, a wall erected between them. Elara's smile faltered, her hand dropping from the AI's casing. The warmth she had felt in her chest, the shared triumph, dissipated, leaving a faint chill. She nodded, her enthusiasm dampened. Right, protocols. She felt a confusing mix of frustration and a strange, aching pity. He was so quick to retreat, so fiercely protective of that invisible barrier. Over the next few days, this pattern repeated itself. Elara, guided by her unique intuition, would uncover another layer of the AI's complex memory architecture, often by focusing on the seemingly aesthetic elements, a specific sequence of musical notes that resonated with a particular emotional tone, a fractal pattern that echoed a deep-seated longing. Each small breakthrough would bring a fleeting moment of shared intensity, a silent, unspoken communion with Kaelen, only for him to retract, to build his walls higher and thicker. She started to notice the subtle cracks more acutely. It wasn't just his words or his cold demeanor. It was the way his hand would instinctively recoil if she moved too close, even inadvertently. A flinch, almost imperceptible, if her elbow brushed his sleeve. The way he would tense, his shoulders drawing inward, if she had to lean over his workstation to point something out on a screen. His eyes, when caught off guard, held a flicker of something akin to fear, a deep-seated aversion that went beyond mere preference. It was a physical, visceral reaction, like an ingrained defense mechanism. One evening, deep into the night, the lab was quiet save for the soft hum of the AI and the rhythmic tap of Elara's fingers on a holographic keyboard. Kaelen had retreated to his private study, leaving her with a mountain of newly decrypted data to sift through. The AI, now partially unlocked, displayed fragments of memories, not direct images, but abstract patterns, emotional signatures, and cryptic textual snippets. One particular sequence caught her attention. It wasn't a memory Kaelen had verbally described, but it resonated with the same sense of guarded pain she perceived in him. The AI projected a swirling kaleidoscope of colors, overlaid with sharp, discordant tones. A single, almost subliminal image flickered within it, a child's hand, small and scarred, reaching out, then being violently pulled back, and a word appearing in fragmented, fractured syllables: betrayal, followed by touch poison. Elara stared, her breath catching in her throat. The fragments were too abstract to be definitive, but her intuition, sharpened by weeks of proximity to Kaelen and the AI, pieced them together. The images, the sounds, the emotional resonance, they spoke of a trauma, a physical violation or a profound betrayal linked to touch, experienced in childhood. This wasn't just Kaelen being reclusive. This was a deep-seated wound, an almost phobic response. His aversion wasn't a choice, it was a scar. A pang of understanding, sharp and unexpected, pierced through her. He wasn't just cold, he was broken, in a way she was only just beginning to comprehend. The rigid facade wasn't just about control. It was a shield, meticulously constructed to protect a vulnerable, wounded core. She wondered what kind of touch could feel like poison, what kind of betrayal could leave such an indelible mark on a child. She felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to understand more, not just for the sake of the project, but for Kaelen himself. This AI held not just his family's secrets, but the very keys to his own hidden pain. A faint click from the lab's main door made her jump, her hand instinctively flying to cover the sensitive data display. Silas Croft, Kaelen's head of security, stood in the doorway, a silent, imposing shadow. His presence always seemed to lower the ambient temperature in the room by a few degrees. He was a man carved from granite, with eyes that missed nothing. "Still at it, Vance." His voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection, yet it carried an undercurrent of something Elara couldn't quite decipher. Suspicion, scrutiny. "Yes, Mr. Croft," Elara replied, trying to keep her own voice steady. "Making progress." She deliberately kept her body angled towards the AI, obscuring the more sensitive fragments she had just uncovered. Silas took a few steps into the lab, his gait precise and unnervingly quiet for such a large man. He didn't approach the workstation, maintaining a respectful but watchful distance. His gaze swept over the holographic projections, then settled on Elara, lingering for a beat too long. "Thorne requires his rest," Silas stated, his eyes unblinking. "He works himself to exhaustion. It's imperative that his schedule is maintained." The words were ostensibly about Kaelen, but the implication was clear. Elara was to respect Kaelen's boundaries, his routine, and by extension, his privacy. It felt like a subtle warning. "I understand," Elara said, her hand still resting near the AI, a protective gesture she wasn't entirely conscious of. "I'll be wrapping up soon." Silas nodded, a curt, almost imperceptible movement. "Good. The integrity of this project and Mr. Thorne's well-being is paramount." His eyes flickered to the AI, then back to Elara, a silent assessment taking place. His loyalty to Kaelen was absolute, a fierce, unwavering force, but Elara sensed it came with its own set of rules, its own moral compass that might not align with hers. He was like a guardian, but one who viewed her as an unknown variable, a potential threat to the fragile ecosystem he protected. "Indeed," Elara replied, meeting his gaze evenly. She felt a prickle of unease. Silas was not just Kaelen's security, he was Kaelen's shadow, his enforcer. And he was watching her, calculating her every move. The unspoken message was clear. She was under scrutiny. As Silas turned and exited the lab as silently as he had entered, Elara let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The air in the lab, which had felt so heavy moments before, now felt thin, almost brittle. She looked back at the AI, at the swirling, enigmatic data that hinted at Kaelen's past. The image of the scarred child's hand, the word poison, echoed in her mind. And suddenly, Kaelen's coldness, his rigid control, his almost visceral avoidance of touch, it all shifted, transforming from an irritating eccentricity into a profound, heartbreaking vulnerability. She realized, with a startling clarity, that decoding this AI was about more than just technology or corporate espionage. It was about unlocking Kaelen Thorne himself, piece by painful piece. And in doing so, she knew, she risked exposing not only his past, but also the unexpectedly fragile, fiercely guarded corners of her own heart. The alliance, initially forced and transactional, was slowly, dangerously, becoming something far more complicated. Chapter 6, Echoes of Trauma. Air in the sterile lab hummed with a low, almost imperceptible thrum, a constant undertone beneath the soft whirring of cooling fans and the gentle click of Elara's tools. It was a sound that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat over these past weeks, a symphony of advanced technology cradling ancient mechanisms. The light, usually a cool, clinical white, seemed to shimmer today, reflecting off the polished surfaces of Kaelen's formidable workstation and the gleaming casing of the AI. Elara sat hunched over the control panel, her brow furrowed in concentration, the delicate curve of her spine a testament to hours spent in meticulous focus. Her fingertips, usually stained with the faint residue of old metals and oils, were pristine, tracing the crystalline patterns of the AI's interface with an almost reverent touch. Kaelen stood a few feet away, a sentinel of silent observation, his posture rigid as ever, arms crossed over his chest. His gaze, an unwavering beam of intense scrutiny, was fixed not on the glowing display, but on Elara herself, on the way her breath hitched sometimes, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the almost imperceptible flicker of intuition across her features. He rarely spoke, his presence a palpable weight in the room, a challenge and a magnet all at once. Today, though, there was a different edge to the silence, a brittle anticipation that made the back of Elara's neck prickle. She had been following a faint, persistent thread within the AI's vast, encrypted labyrinth, a feeling more than a logical pathway. It was a resonance, a series of discordant emotional echoes that grew stronger with each carefully input command. The AI, which had been stubbornly presenting a wall of complex, abstract symbols, now seemed to be subtly yielding, its intricate display shifting. Faint, ghostly tendrils of light pulsed within the crystalline structure, mirroring the quickening beat of Elara's own heart. A sudden, sharp surge of energy pulsed through her fingertips, making her flinch, not from pain, but from the sheer unexpected intensity. It was like touching a live wire, not of electricity, but of raw, unfiltered emotion. On the primary interface screen, the abstract symbols fractured, shattering into a kaleidoscope of fleeting images. They were hazy, like memories recalled through a thick fog, but undeniably potent. A child's small hand reaching. A sterile, gleaming metallic surface, cold and unforgiving. The distant echo of a high-pitched, almost mechanical whine. A sense of overwhelming cold, not of temperature, but of an absence of warmth, a chilling isolation. A flash of a face, distorted by what looked like pain or fear, the eyes wide and dark, undeniably Kaelen's, though impossibly young. And then, a searing, visceral sensation of betrayal, a violation of trust so profound it felt like a physical blow to Elara's chest. The images blurred, fragmented, then coalesced around one central, horrifying moment. A small, trembling hand being pulled back violently from something, a sharp, metallic clang, and a child's muffled cry, quickly stifled. The dominant sensation was an acute, paralyzing fear, a primal terror of touch, of connection, of something irrevocably breaking. Elara gasped, a quiet, involuntary sound that still seemed to crack the lab's pervasive silence. The images vanished as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind only a faint, residual glow on the screen, a ghostly afterimage of trauma. She felt a profound ache in her own chest, an echo of the child's pain. It was more than just a vision. It was a deeply felt experience, a sliver of Kaelen's deepest, most guarded wound. What was that? Kaelen's voice, when it came, was a low, guttural growl, stripped of its usual measured calm. He had moved, Elara realized, not closer, but a step back, his body language suddenly radiating a feral defensiveness. The usually pristine lines of his face were drawn taut, his jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle jumped just beneath his ear. His eyes, usually a glacial gray, were now almost black, wide with a raw, unmasked terror that sent a chill through Elara. She slowly lifted her hands from the panel, feeling the residual thrum of energy fading. "A memory fragment," she whispered, her voice a little unsteady. It felt like a child, your childhood." She dared to meet his gaze and saw not just anger, but a profound, shattering vulnerability. The carefully constructed walls he maintained around himself seemed to crack, if only for a fleeting second, revealing the broken boy beneath the formidable man. "Shut it down," Kaelen bit out, his voice sharp and laced with an edge of desperation she hadn't heard before. "Stop, now." He took another step back, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. He looked as if he was about to bolt, to tear himself free from the very air in the room, which suddenly felt thick with the ghost of that painful memory. "Abandon the decryption. We'll find another way, a different approach." Elara's heart twisted. She saw the genuine anguish etched into his features, the frantic, almost panicked flicker in his eyes. It was a reaction so visceral, so utterly unlike the controlled, aloof Kaelen Thorne she knew, that it disarmed her completely. Her own frustration, her own desire to unravel the mystery, melted away in the face of his overwhelming distress. He was not just a billionaire employer, he was a person deeply, fundamentally wounded. "Kaelen," she said, her voice soft, calm, deliberately even. She kept her hands open, palms facing him, a silent gesture of peace, of non-threat. She didn't move, didn't try to close the distance he was so desperately trying to create. "Look at me." He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow gasps. His gaze darted, unfocused, as if trying to locate an escape route. But her quiet command seemed to snag his attention, pulling him back from the precipice of panic. Slowly, reluctantly, his eyes settled on hers. "It's okay," she continued, her voice a gentle balm in the charged atmosphere. "It's just a memory. It can't hurt you now, not in the way it did then." She chose her words carefully, knowing that any hint of pity or overfamiliarity would send him retreating further. Instead, she offered understanding, a quiet strength. It was hazy, fragmented, but it felt like a warning, a deep-seated aversion to touch, to connection, linked to the tech somehow. His breath hitched again, a sharp, painful sound. He wanted to deny it. She could see it in the way his lips thinned, the subtle shake of his head. But the truth of her words, the accuracy of her intuitive read, was undeniable. He was trapped, caught between the agonizing memory and the undeniable proof of its origins staring him in the face. "We need to understand this," Elara pressed on, her voice unwavering. "This isn't just about unlocking the AI's secrets for your empire, Kaelen. This is about understanding what happened to you, what shaped you." Her gaze held his, firm and compassionate. "Running from it won't make it disappear. It'll just keep echoing in the dark." A tremor ran through his body, a barely perceptible shiver. He didn't speak, but the rigid tension in his shoulders seemed to ease, infinitesimally. The raw panic in his eyes receded, replaced by a profound, desolate sadness that was almost harder to witness. Elara felt a fierce, protective instinct bloom within her, surprising in its intensity. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, to bridge the vast, invisible chasm that separated them. But she knew better. She knew that any physical touch, however well-intentioned, would only shatter the fragile trust she was painstakingly building. Instead, she simply held his gaze, a silent promise of steadfastness. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken emotions, with the ghost of a child's pain and the burgeoning, dangerous awareness of two adults caught in a storm. He was still distressed, profoundly so, but the immediate impulse to abandon everything had receded. Her calm presence, her unwavering empathy, had acted as an anchor, pulling him back from the brink. "A warning," he finally repeated, the words raspy, as if his throat were constricted. He looked away from her, his gaze falling to the AI's display, which now showed only its standard, intricate patterns, innocent of the trauma it had just revealed. Yes, a warning. The silence that followed was heavy, fraught with the lingering echoes of his pain. Kaelen remained rooted to his spot, shoulders slightly hunched, his usual towering presence diminished by the raw vulnerability that clung to him. Elara watched him, her own heart aching with a mixture of empathy and a strange, unfamiliar pull. She had seen the impenetrable fortress around him crack, and what she had glimpsed inside was not weakness, but profound hurt. She slowly pushed herself up from the console, straightening her posture. Her fingers still tingled, a phantom sensation from the energy surge. She felt drained, as if she had absorbed some of the memory's pain directly into her own being. She needed to recalibrate, to ground herself. Her gaze, however, kept drifting back to him. He was a puzzle she was compelled to solve, not just the AI, but Kaelen Thorne himself. She moved towards the opposite side of the large console, intending to gather a few discarded tools. As she leaned forward, her hand reaching for a specialized micro screwdriver, Kaelen simultaneously shifted, his own hand extending towards the same spot, presumably to adjust a setting or retrieve something she hadn't noticed. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, an accidental, almost graceful dance. For a breathless instant, their hands hovered inches apart. His skin, pale and finely veined, seemed impossibly close to hers. She could feel the faint warmth radiating from his hand, the subtle shift in the air pressure caused by his proximity. Her breath caught in her throat. Time seemed to warp, stretching out that single moment into an eternity. His eyes, still clouded with residual anguish, flickered from the console to her hand, then to her face. A spark, sharp and undeniable, arced between them. A silent, electric current that had nothing to do with the technology surrounding them. Elara felt a dizzying lurch in her stomach, a sudden, fierce desire to simply close the minuscule distance, to feel the texture of his skin against hers, to offer the simplest, most human form of comfort. It was an irrational, dangerous impulse, but one that resonated deep within her. Then, just as quickly, the connection snapped. Kaelen's hand recoiled with the speed of a startled adder, pulling back so abruptly that he almost knocked over a small stack of schematics. His body stiffened, a full-body flinch that sent a fresh wave of coldness through the air. He averted his gaze, his face immediately shuddering, the vulnerability she had witnessed moments ago slamming behind a reinforced door. The intense focus he usually exuded returned, albeit with a forced, almost desperate edge. We should take a break, he stated, his voice clipped, devoid of the earlier emotion. He turned sharply on his heel, his back to her, and walked with brisk, determined strides towards the exit of the lab. Reassess the data. I'll have Silas review the security logs. Make sure there are no external breaches or interference that could have caused this. He offered no further explanation, no lingering glance, simply vanished through the pneumatic doors, leaving Elara alone in the suddenly cavernous lab. She stood there, her hand still outstretched in the air, a ghost of his presence lingering on her skin. Frustration warred with a deeper, more profound sense of bewilderment. He had been so close, so raw, so utterly human. And then, just like that, he was gone, retreated behind his impenetrable walls. The near touch had been nothing to him, perhaps, or everything. For her, it was a brand, an indelible mark of their intensifying, dangerous proximity. It wasn't just the AI she was being drawn into. It was Kaelen Thorne himself, a labyrinth of pain and power, and an undeniable, magnetic allure. She felt frustrated, yes, but also increasingly, irretrievably drawn to him, to the enigma he presented, to the fractured soul she had glimpsed beneath the polished, billionaire facade. The silence of the lab after he left felt amplified, heavy, and oppressive. Elara lingered for a few more minutes, trying to calm the erratic beat of her heart, to banish the lingering image of his panicked eyes, the feeling of his almost touch. Eventually, she gathered her things, the specialized tools and notepads, and made her way back to the temporary suite Kaelen had provided for her within the sprawling estate. The opulence of the rooms felt strangely cold tonight, a stark contrast to the volatile emotional landscape she had just navigated. Later that evening, long after the setting sun had painted the sky in streaks of bruised purple and fiery orange, Elara found herself pacing the plush carpet of her living area, the faint scent of expensive cleaning products a constant reminder of her gilded cage. Her phone felt heavy in her hand. She needed to talk to someone, to ground herself in the mundane reality of her old life, if only for a few minutes. Imani. Imani would listen, even if she couldn't fully understand. She dialed, listening to the familiar ring on the other end, a lifeline stretching across the vast, isolating distance of Kaelen's estate. Elara, finally, you called. Imani's voice, warm and familiar, broke through the sterile quiet. I was starting to think Thorne had you locked in a dungeon, forcing you to decipher ancient alien scripts. How's the music box? Elara managed a weak laugh, settling onto a ridiculously soft velvet armchair. Something like that, Imani, you wouldn't believe it. She paused, choosing her words carefully, already feeling the burden of the secrets she had to keep. It's incredibly complex, far more than just a music box. The mechanisms are unlike anything I've ever seen. It feels alive, almost, like it has its own history, its own pulse. She omitted the sentient AI, the encrypted memories, the trauma. Those were not things she could share, not yet. Alive, huh? Sounds like you're falling in love with another eccentric antique, Elara, Imani teased, but there was an underlying current of concern in her tone. Are you getting paid? Are you eating? Are you still in one piece? The last time you got this obsessed, you nearly electrocuted yourself trying to fix that Victorian automaton. I'm fine, Imani, really, Elara insisted, though a shiver traced down her spine, recalling Kaelen's distress. And yes, the pay is more than generous, but the atmosphere here is intense. Kaelen Thorne is a lot. He's brilliant, undeniably, but so rigid, so closed off. It's like working in a constant state of high alert. She sighed, leaning her head back against the velvet. And the object itself, it's giving me these intense emotional echoes, more vivid than usual. Like it's steeped in some kind of deep, personal history. Emotional echoes. Elara, honey, maybe you need a break, Imani suggested gently. You've been working too hard. Is he keeping you there day and night? Is he weird? He's a billionaire, they're all a bit eccentric. Weird is an understatement, Elara murmured, a small, wry smile playing on her lips. He's guarded, profoundly so, and there's this energy between us, this unspoken tension. It's exhilarating and exhausting all at once. She thought of Kaelen's shattered expression, the abrupt recoil, the electric charge of their near touch. How could she explain that? How could she articulate the feeling of being drawn to a man who recoiled from human contact? A man who seemed to carry the weight of the world, and some unspeakable childhood trauma behind his cold, gray eyes. Tension, huh? Imani's voice was suddenly sharper, a hint of suspicion in it. Is this a professional tension, or are we talking about something else? Because I remember you mentioning his intense gaze. Elara felt a flush rise to her cheeks, even though Imani couldn't see her. It's complicated, Imani. It's just a very high-stakes project, and he's a very intense person. The pressure is immense, and this object, it feels like it's holding secrets that are absolutely vital to him. She changed the subject quickly. How are things with your new exhibition? Did Professor Davies finally approve your proposal? They talked for a while longer about Imani's work, about the mundane struggles of their shared academic circles, about rent and bills, and the distant, familiar world Elara had temporarily left behind. Each word of normalcy was a small anchor, pulling her back from the strange, intoxicating current of Kaelen's world. But even as she listened, a part of her mind remained fixated on the lab, on the AI, on Kaelen's face etched with pain. After she hung up, the silence returned, heavier this time. Elara walked to the large window, gazing out at the meticulously manicured grounds of Thorne Manor, swallowed by the inky blackness of night. The estate, so grand and imposing, felt like a fortress, sealing her in and sealing Kaelen within his own, deeper walls. She was a restorer, yes, but this wasn't just about mending gears and polishing brass. It was about mending something far more fragile, far more profound. And with every passing moment, every glimpse beneath his formidable facade, she found herself not just an unwilling ally, but increasingly, irrevocably, entangled in the enigma of Kaelen Thorne. The echoes of his trauma resonated not just from the AI, but within her own soul now, pulling her deeper into his dangerous, intoxicating orbit. Chapter 7, Lyra's Return. The air in the high-tech laboratory always held a peculiar scent, a clean, sterile sharpness underlaid with something metallic, like ozone, and the faint, sweet ghost of old wood and brass that clung to the automaton. Elara had grown accustomed to it, to the hum of the servers tucked away behind frosted glass panels, to the soft glow of the many monitors Kaelen preferred to keep active even when he wasn't directly working. Today, a soft, diffuse light filtered through the tall, narrow windows, painting the polished steel surfaces with a cool, pearlescent sheen. She was hunched over the AI, its intricate mechanisms laid bare on the pristine workbench, a magnifying visor perched on her nose, her fingers meticulously tracing a hairline fracture on one of the delicate, almost organic-looking crystalline structures that pulsed with the AI's faint internal light. Kaelen was nowhere in sight, a rare quiet moment that allowed her to truly sink into the object's peculiar energy, to listen to the whispers it offered. A sudden, crisp click of a heel on the polished concrete floor shattered the quiet. It was a sound too deliberate, too sharp, to be Kaelen's measured tread or Silas's soft-souled approach. Elara straightened slowly, the visor sliding down her nose, her gaze lifting to the doorway. A woman stood there, framed against the soft light of the corridor, an undeniable presence that seemed to warp the very air around her. She was stunning, in a way that felt entirely architectural. Her dark hair, a shade deeper than Kaelen's, was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon that gleamed under the overhead lights. Her suit, a pristine cream linen that somehow managed to look both utterly relaxed and impossibly tailored, draped perfectly over a figure that was both slender and commanding. Elara's eyes, trained to absorb minute details, catalogued the subtle shimmer of a silk blouse beneath the jacket, the minimalist gold earrings that caught the light, the subtle, almost imperceptible curve of her lips that hinted at a smile, or perhaps something more predatory. There was a striking resemblance to Kaelen in the sharp line of her jaw, the intensity of her eyes, a brilliant, almost startling blue that seemed to assess Elara with unnerving speed. "And you must be Elara Vance." The woman's voice was smooth, cultured, with an undercurrent of steel. It was not a question. Elara felt a prickle of unease, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Her intuition, the one that usually guided her through complex restorations, screamed a warning. "Yes, and you are." She hated how her voice sounded, a little too soft, a little too defensive in the face of this unexpected, formidable presence. The woman took a slow step into the lab, her gaze sweeping over the array of tools, the open casing of the AI, the screens displaying complex data. Her eyes lingered on the AI for a beat too long, an almost greedy glint in their depths, before returning to Elara. Lyra Thorne, Kaelen's sister. The revelation hit Elara with the force of a physical blow. Lyra, of course, the estranged sister, the geneticist. Elara had heard snippets, rumors, but nothing that prepared her for this. She felt a sudden, profound understanding of the tension that had always hummed beneath Kaelen's carefully constructed calm. Right, Elara managed, fumbling with the visor, setting it down on the workbench. She felt suddenly exposed, her practical lab coat and slightly smudged fingers a stark contrast to Lyra's immaculate poise. Kaelen didn't mention you were coming. Lyra's lip curved, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement that didn't quite reach her eyes. He wouldn't. We don't exactly send each other holiday cards, but rumors have a way of traveling, especially when they concern Father's most ambitious projects. She walked further into the room, her movements fluid and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Her scent reached Elara then, a sophisticated, expensive perfume, floral but with a sharp, almost metallic edge, reminiscent of the lab itself. Lyra stopped a few feet from the workbench, her eyes again fixed on the AI, their blue depths alight with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "So this is it," she murmured, her voice dropping a little, a note of awe blending with something colder, more calculating. She reached out a hand, gloved in soft leather, stopping just short of touching the exposed circuitry, as if observing a rare, dangerous specimen. The last great secret. He always did have a penchant for the dramatic. Elara shifted uncomfortably. "It's more complex than just a secret, Dr. Thorne. It's sentient. It holds memories." Lyra finally tore her gaze from the AI, turning back to Elara with an unnervingly direct look. "Oh, I know. I've been following my father's work for years, even after. I always suspected he was on the verge of something extraordinary with cognitive architecture. Memory, consciousness. Imagine the implications, Elara, the sheer, unadulterated potential." Her voice had gained a fervent edge, a barely contained excitement that vibrated through the air. To map, store, even edit human memory. To transcend the limitations of biological decay. It's not just a project, it's a revolution. A new era for humanity. Elara felt a chill trace down her spine. The way Lyra spoke, it was less about understanding or preserving and more about harnessing, conquering. "Kaelen is cautious," Elara offered, trying to gauge Lyra's reaction. Lyra let out a short, soft laugh, devoid of humor. "Kaelen is always cautious. It's his burden, his curse. While he worries about the ethics and the liabilities, the world passes him by. My father always understood that true progress requires a certain fearlessness." Her gaze swept over Elara again, sharp and appraising. "But you, Elara, you have the touch, don't you? The intuition, the connection. He wouldn't have brought you in if you didn't." Elara felt her cheeks flush, a mixture of pride and profound unease. Lyra's words were a compliment, but they felt like a probe, a test. "I just understand how mechanical things work, how to coax their secrets." Coax secrets, yes, a beautiful way to put it. Lyra took another step closer, leaning slightly over the workbench, her eyes still fixed on the AI. "Tell me, what have you found? What memories has it yielded? Kaelen is notoriously tight-lipped, even with me." Her tone was light, almost conversational, but the intensity in her eyes never wavered. Elara felt a subtle pressure building, an unspoken demand. Before Elara could formulate a response that was both truthful and appropriately evasive, the lab door slid open again, this time with a silent, familiar grace. Kaelen stood there, his posture rigid, his expression a mask of controlled fury. His dark eyes, usually so guarded, were blazing with a raw, almost primal anger that was startling to behold. He took in the scene, Lyra leaning over the workbench, her attention solely on the AI, Elara standing awkwardly beside her, and a muscle in his jaw clenched. "Lyra," Kaelen's voice was a low growl, utterly devoid of warmth. "What are you doing here?" Lyra slowly straightened, turning to face her brother. Her composure was remarkable, not a hair out of place, not a tremor in her voice. "Kaelen, darling brother, is that any way to greet your only sister?" She even managed a small, genuine-looking smile this time, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. You know why I'm here, she continued, her voice losing its edge of playful sarcasm, becoming sharper, more serious. I'm here for Father's legacy, the culmination of his life's work. The AI, you can't possibly think you can keep this to yourself. Kaelen took a few steps into the room, his movements stiff, almost jerky. He stopped several feet from the workbench, putting a clear distance between himself and his sister. Elara noticed how his gaze flickered from Lyra to the AI, then to Elara, as if assessing the battlefield. He didn't look at Elara for reassurance, but rather as if to confirm she was still standing, still unharmed. It was a subtle gesture, but Elara felt its weight, a strange comfort amidst the growing tension. This isn't a toy, Lyra, Kaelen said, his voice clipped, each word delivered with deliberate precision. It's dangerous. You know what Father was capable of, what he experimented with. And you know what he was capable of achieving, Lyra retorted, her voice rising slightly, a hint of exasperation seeping in. Imagine, Kaelen, imagine a world where Alzheimer's is a distant memory, where trauma can be repatterned, where consciousness can be uploaded, shared, even enhanced. This isn't just about the Thorne legacy, it's about the future of human existence. Our work, our Father's work, could change everything. She gestured emphatically towards the AI, her hand sweeping through the air with a grand, almost theatrical flourish. Elara watched the exchange, feeling like a silent observer in a very intimate, very volatile family drama. She could feel the echoes of their shared past, a complex tapestry of ambition, genius, and unspoken resentments. Lyra's passion was undeniable, almost intoxicating in its fervor, but Elara couldn't shake the sense of an underlying ruthlessness, a willingness to push boundaries that Kaelen seemed to instinctively resist. Kaelen ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare sign of agitation. And at what cost, Lyra? What did Father sacrifice to get this far? What did he risk? What did he do? His voice dropped on the last word, heavy with a pain Elara recognized from the fragmented memories the AI had shown them. It was the pain of a son haunted by his father's sins, by a legacy he felt compelled to both protect and atone for. Lyra's expression hardened. Always the martyr, Kaelen, always dwelling on the past. Father made difficult choices, yes, but he always aimed for progress. You're letting fear paralyze you. She turned her piercing blue gaze back to Elara. Elara, tell him what you've seen, the visions, the potential. This isn't just an encryption puzzle, is it? It's a roadmap to a new understanding of the human mind. Her words were an attempt to draw Elara onto her side, to use her unique connection to the AI as leverage. Elara felt the weight of both siblings' expectations. She glanced at Kaelen, whose eyes were fixed on her, an unreadable intensity in their depths. He wasn't asking her to lie, but she knew he was implicitly asking her to be careful, to protect the delicate balance they had established. The AI, it's powerful, Elara began slowly, choosing her words with extreme care. It does hold fragmented memories, but they are encrypted, deeply complex. We're only just beginning to understand their structure, and they are disturbing at times, suggesting a trauma linked to Kaelen's childhood and the development of the technology itself. She made sure to emphasize the disturbing nature of the memories, the potential for harm, not just revolution. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. Disturbing, nonsense. All great advancements come with collateral. The data is what matters, the architecture. We need to unlock its full capabilities, not just sift through old family dramas. She took a step towards the workbench, her hand again hovering over the AI. Perhaps I could take a look at your analysis, Elara, offer a fresh perspective. My background in genetic sequencing and neural networks might provide some insight into the encryption protocols. After all, the human genome is just another form of complex code, isn't it? It was an overt attempt, subtle in its phrasing but clear in its intent. Elara felt a prickle of alarm. Lyra wanted access, direct access, and she was trying to use her academic credentials to bypass Kaelen's authority. Kaelen stepped forward, his body language stiffening even further, effectively placing himself between Lyra and the AI. My sister is a brilliant geneticist, Elara, but her expertise is not in antique restoration or proprietary AI decryption, he said, his voice flat, his gaze never leaving Lyra's. The AI is fragile. Its data integrity is paramount. We cannot risk any unauthorized interference. Lyra's smile vanished completely. Unauthorized interference? Kaelen, this is my father's work, my legacy too. You're treating me like a rival, not family. Her voice had a sharp, wounded edge now, revealing a crack in her polished facade. Elara caught it, a fleeting glimpse of genuine pain beneath the ambition, a longing for recognition, perhaps even for acceptance, that was constantly denied by her brother. Some legacies are best left buried, Lyra, Kaelen responded, his voice losing some of its controlled calm, a tremor of deeper emotion now apparent. You have no idea what you're meddling with. Rune Vex is circling. If he gets his hands on this, on anything father created, it would be catastrophic. Lyra scoffed, a dismissive sound. Rune Vex is a vulture. He's always been after Thorne Industries. But he's not the biggest threat here, Kaelen. Your fear is. Imagine if we could use the AI to cure Parkinson's, to understand consciousness itself. What's a corporate rival compared to that? She took a step closer, invading Kaelen's personal space, a deliberate challenge to his aversion to touch. Elara watched, holding her breath, as Kaelen flinched almost imperceptibly, his body tensing, but he held his ground, his gaze locked with his sister. We are not ready to unleash something we don't fully understand, Kaelen insisted, his voice low and guttural. The risks are too high, and Elara's methods, while unconventional, are showing promise. We will proceed with caution. Lyra's eyes, still fixed on Kaelen, flickered momentarily to Elara. It was a look of pure calculation, as if assessing Elara's weaknesses, her potential as an ally or an obstacle. Unconventional. Yes, I've heard about your intuition, Elara. Fascinating. Perhaps you could give me a private briefing later, away from Kaelen's overly protective gaze. I'm sure there are nuances he's missing. The offer hung in the air, a thinly veiled attempt to separate Elara from Kaelen, to gain independent access. Elara felt a cold dread settle in her chest. She was truly caught in the middle now, a pawn in a game she barely understood, between two formidable wills, each pulling her in a different direction. Anything Elara discovers, she shares with me, Kaelen cut in, his voice steely, leaving no room for argument. Her work is critical, and her discretion is absolute. There will be no private briefings. Lyra finally broke eye contact with Kaelen, her gaze sweeping around the lab as if committing every detail to memory. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face, this one undeniably predatory. As you wish, dear brother, for now. But I assure you, I won't be leaving until I understand the full scope of Father's final masterpiece, and I won't stand by while you let fear dictate its destiny. She turned back to Elara, her blue eyes piercing. I look forward to seeing your progress, Elara. Truly, I have a feeling we'll have much to discuss. With that, Lyra turned on her heel and walked out of the lab as smoothly and silently as she had entered, leaving behind a lingering scent of expensive perfume and an oppressive silence. Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her shoulders slumping. The air in the lab, which had felt charged and suffocating moments before, now felt thin, almost brittle. She looked at Kaelen, who was still standing rigidly, his back to her, staring at the empty doorway. His shoulders were hunched, and his entire posture radiated a profound weariness, a deep-seated tension that seemed to permeate every fiber of his being. Kaelen, Elara whispered, the sound almost swallowed by the vastness of the lab. He finally turned, his face pale, his eyes still holding that raw, wounded look. He didn't say anything, just looked at her, his gaze searching, almost desperate. Elara felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to him, to offer some small comfort, but she remembered his aversion, the rigid wall he kept around himself. She clenched her hands into fists at her sides, fighting the impulse. "She's intense," Elara offered, the understatement hanging awkwardly in the air. Kaelen gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Intense doesn't begin to cover it. Lyra has always seen the world in terms of potential, unharnessed power. She doesn't care for limitations, for consequences, not where her ambition is concerned." He walked slowly towards the workbench, stopping a few feet from the AI, his eyes fixed on its glowing core. "She wants to weaponize it, Elara, not with bombs, but with control. Control over the very fabric of human thought. That's her vision of revolution." Elara shivered, a cold understanding blooming in her chest. Lyra's words, so passionate and grand, now seemed chillingly detached. But human memory, it's so personal, so fragile. "Precisely," Kaelen said, his voice quiet, almost mournful. He lifted a hand, then let it drop, as if contemplating touching the AI but pulling back at the last moment. "Father created this with a similar ambition. He believed he was creating something to transcend human frailty, to preserve genius. But he went too far. And Lyra, she inherited his drive without his conscience." He paused, then looked at Elara, his gaze intense. "You felt it, didn't you? The hunger in her. The way she looks at the AI, as if it's hers to command." Elara nodded slowly. "There was a pain there too, though, underneath the ambition, like she's trying to prove something or make up for something." She tried to articulate the fleeting impression she'd gotten, the subtle undercurrent of vulnerability in Lyra's otherwise unyielding demeanor. Kaelen's expression softened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something akin to sorrow in his eyes. She always felt overshadowed, not just by father, but by the expectations of the Thorne name. She believes this is her way to claim her own legacy, to emerge from the shadow of others. He sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of years of unspoken conflict. But she doesn't understand the true cost. Not yet. He looked at Elara, a silent plea in his eyes that went beyond words. "We need to be careful, Elara, extremely careful. She's brilliant, ruthless, and she knows how to manipulate. She will try to get to you. To access your research, to bypass me. Do not give her anything. Do not let her near the AI, not without me." Elara met his gaze, feeling a surge of determination. The unexpected arrival of Lyra had thrown a wrench into their already complicated alliance, but it had also solidified Elara's understanding of the stakes and of Kaelen's true burden. She saw now, more clearly than ever, that his caution wasn't just about protecting his empire, but about protecting something far more fundamental: the integrity of memory, the sanctity of human consciousness, and perhaps the lingering fragments of his own family's fractured past. "I won't," Elara promised, her voice firm. "I understand. I won't let her near it, or my research." She watched as a faint tension eased from Kaelen's shoulders, a minuscule shift, but significant enough for Elara to notice. He was still guarded, still distant, but in that moment, in the aftermath of his sister's unsettling visit, there was a fragile thread of trust that had subtly, almost imperceptibly, tightened between them. And Elara, caught in the accelerating current of the Thorne family's dark legacy, knew with a chilling certainty that her quiet, meticulous work had just become infinitely more dangerous. The whispers of the AI now sounded less like distant echoes and more like urgent warnings. Chapter 8, The Betrayal Within. The air in the lab, usually a symphony of low, controlled hums from various diagnostic machines, and the whisper-soft whir of the AI's internal mechanisms, suddenly fractured. Elara had been hunched over the workbench, her fingers delicately tracing the almost imperceptible lines of a hairline fracture on one of the AI's miniature bronze plating segments. a piece she was convinced held a key to a deeper layer of its encryption. The familiar, comforting weight of her own breath, slow and steady, was suddenly caught in her throat. A sharp, almost physical jolt pulsed through the floor beneath her worn boots. It wasn't an earthquake, not exactly, but something deeply unsettling, as if the very bones of the Thorne Industries network were screaming. The overhead lights, usually a consistent, clinical white, flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and shrank like grotesque spirits across the polished surfaces. A low, insistent thrum began to emanate from the walls themselves, a vibration that resonated deep in Elara's chest. Her hand instinctively flew to the small, ornate music box, now mostly disassembled, but still resting prominently on its velvet cushion, as if to shield it. Then the screens. All around the vast, glass-walled laboratory, the myriad monitors that usually displayed complex algorithms, data streams, and Kaelen's meticulously organized research began to strobe. Lines of code, a torrent of green and white characters, scrolled upward at an impossible speed, then abruptly inverted, turning a virulent, flashing red. A shrill, piercing klaxon wailed, echoing off the high ceilings, a sound that sliced through the quiet sanctity of the lab and sent a cold shiver down Elara's spine. Kaelen was there, of course. He always seemed to materialize in moments of crisis, a phantom of controlled intensity. He had been across the room, at his own imposing console, his back to her, lost in a labyrinth of his own code. Now, he was a blur of motion, his chair scraping back with a harsh shriek as he shot to his feet. His face, usually a mask of detached calm, was taut, etched with a severity Elara had only glimpsed before. His eyes, those piercing, intelligent windows, narrowed, sweeping across the chaotic displays. "Vex," he breathed, the single word sharp, precise, and laced with a venomous certainty that made Elara's blood run cold. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The name hung in the electrified air, a tangible threat. Elara's own heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising cacophony. She felt a surge of fear, a primal instinct to shrink away, but then another, stronger emotion took hold, a fierce protectiveness for the delicate mechanisms splayed before her. This wasn't just metal and wires. It was sentient, fragile, and now under attack. She looked at Kaelen, her gaze seeking his, a silent question passing between them. He met her eyes for a fleeting second, a spark of shared understanding, then turned back to his console, his fingers already flying across the holographic keyboard with impossible speed. He was a whirlwind of controlled energy, his movements economical, purposeful. "Firewall breach, level 7, he muttered, more to himself than to her, his voice a low growl above the alarms. "He's probing the core infrastructure, targeting the secure server housing the AI's primary data matrix." Elara felt a sudden, dizzying drop in her stomach. This wasn't just a nuisance. It was a direct assault, a digital war being waged in the very heart of Thorne Industries. She moved instinctively, pushing her chair back, her eyes scanning the nearest monitor. It showed a map of the network, a complex web of interconnected nodes, now alight with angry red indicators, like a rash spreading rapidly. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. Kaelen didn't look up. "Access the local console," he ordered, his voice clipped, urgent. "Initiate a reverse proxy, reroute any incoming data packets to a decoy server. Use the algorithm I gave you last week, the obfuscation protocol. It's labeled Project Nightingale." Project Nightingale. Elara remembered it. Kaelen had been so particular about her having it, almost as if he'd anticipated something like this. She moved to the secondary console, her fingers trembling slightly as she logged in. The glowing interface felt alien under her touch, far removed from the tactile comfort of antique brass and steel. Yet, A strange calm began to settle over her as she focused. She could do this. She had always been good with patterns, with understanding intricate systems. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, mirroring Kaelen's frantic pace. She navigated the complex directories, her mind racing, recalling Kaelen's brief but intense training sessions, the way he had meticulously explained each step, each protocol. He hadn't just taught her to fix the AI, he had taught her to defend it. Incoming data stream too fast, Kaelen ground out, his jaw tight. He's using a multi-vector assault, a zero-day exploit. Damn it. He slammed his palm against the desk, a rare display of raw frustration. The sound was swallowed by the blare of the alarms. Elara's intuition, usually a whisper, was now a loud, insistent scream in her mind. She felt the flow of the attack, a dark, invasive current trying to force its way into the system. She could almost visualize it, a malicious entity clawing at the digital walls. Without thinking, she deviated from the exact instructions Kaelen had given her, bypassing a few steps she felt were too slow, too predictable. She went directly for the core obfuscation, throwing up a digital smokescreen, creating a labyrinth of false pathways and dead ends. "Elara, what are you doing?" Kaelen's voice was sharp, laced with surprise. He glanced at her screen, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as he saw her rapid, unconventional maneuvers. "I'm creating a diversion," she explained, her gaze fixed on the glowing lines of code, her mind in a flow state she usually reserved for the most delicate restorations. "It's like leading water away from a leak. If I can make enough noise, enough false positives, it might buy us time." A moment of silence, save for the alarms. Then Kaelen's voice lower, a hint of grudging admiration in his tone. "Clever, push it hard." Their movements became a strange, frantic dance. Kaelen, barking orders, his body leaning forward, muscles coiled, eyes glued to his main screen. Elara, responding with an almost uncanny speed, anticipating his next command, her own mind racing ahead, finding shortcuts, identifying vulnerabilities in Vex's attack vector that Kaelen, steeped in traditional cybersecurity, might have missed. Her fingers brushed against the smooth, cool surface of the console. The air in the lab grew heavy, thick with the smell of ozone and the faint, metallic tang of fear. The alarms continued their relentless assault on her ears, but she barely registered them, her entire being focused on the task at hand. She felt Kaelen's presence beside her, a radiating heat despite the physical distance between their consoles. His concentration was a palpable force, a tension that resonated with her own. There was a moment when a particularly virulent wave of the attack threatened to overwhelm their defenses, when Kaelen leaned closer, his voice a desperate whisper right beside her ear. "We need to isolate the AI's primary neural network. Now, if Vex gets even a fragment of the core memory, it's over." His breath, warm against her temple, sent a jolt through her, a stark contrast to his usual untouchable aura. He hadn't flinched from the proximity, hadn't recoiled. The crisis had stripped away his carefully constructed barriers, revealing a raw, urgent need for connection, for collaboration. Elara nodded, her eyes still on the screen. "I see it, the anomaly signature. He's looking for the unique identifier." She pushed another sequence of code, her fingers flying, a complex algorithm she'd intuitively devised during one of her feeling sessions with the AI. It was a digital lock, fashioned from the AI's own unique resonance. Suddenly, a new screen flashed onto Kaelen's main monitor, independent of their inputs. It showed a series of access logs, timestamps, and IP addresses. Kaelen's eyes narrowed further, his jaw clenching. He scrolled rapidly, a deep frown carving lines between his brows. "This isn't just Vex," he said, his voice low, dangerous. Elara felt a prickle of unease. The alarms were still screaming, but his tone was far more chilling. The entry points the protocols bypassed. This isn't an external exploit alone. Someone gave him the keys. Elara felt a cold dread seep into her bones. Insider information. The thought was a sickening twist in her stomach. Who? Who in Kaelen's meticulously vetted, high-security world would betray him? Her mind immediately flashed to Lyra, Kaelen's estranged sister, with her ruthless ambition and keen interest in the AI's potential. But then, another image intruded. Silas Croft, Kaelen's imposing head of security, always present, always watchful, his loyalty absolute, or so it seemed. As if summoned by her thoughts, the heavy steel door to the lab hissed open, and Silas Croft strode in, his face a grim mask, his movements precise and unhurried despite the chaos. His presence, even amidst the screaming alarms, felt like a sudden drop in temperature. He moved with the quiet efficiency of a predator, his gaze sweeping the room, settling on Kaelen, and then, almost imperceptibly, on Elara. "Sir, we have multiple system breaches reported across Thorne Industries," Silas stated, his voice a low rumble, cutting through the din. He didn't shout, didn't show panic, just a chilling, controlled calm. "The network is under severe attack. I've initiated a full system lockdown on the main servers, but the secondary nodes are still vulnerable." "Someone fed Vex the access codes, Silas," Kaelen cut in, his eyes blazing, still glued to the incriminating logs. "Proprietary encryption keys. This isn't just a hack, it's a betrayal." Silas's eyes, dark and unreadable, flickered to the screen Kaelen indicated. His expression remained impassive. "Understood, sir. My team is tracing the source now. I recommend we immediately sever all external network connections to this lab. Isolate the AI completely. It's the only way to guarantee its safety." Elara felt a sudden, sharp jolt of intuition, a discordant note in the otherwise logical suggestion. Silas's words made perfect sense, were perfectly rational. But something about the way he said it, the slight, almost imperceptible shift in his posture, the too calm tone, raised a red flag in her mind. Severing all external connections would protect the AI, yes, but it would also cut off Kaelen's ability to trace the attack's origin, to fight back beyond this room. It felt like a containment measure that also blinded them. "No," Kaelen said, surprisingly, a beat before Elara could voice her unformed suspicion. "We don't cut off communication completely. We need to monitor their movements. We need to know who's behind this inside. Isolate the AI's core functions, reroute the attack to a dummy server, but keep a backdoor open for surveillance." Silas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sir, that's an unnecessary risk. A dummy server can still be compromised, giving them an entry point. My recommendation stands, complete isolation." "My decision stands, Silas," Kaelen retorted, his voice chillingly calm, a stark contrast to the frantic energy he'd displayed moments before. "Find the source, and secure the perimeter physically. I want every inch of this estate locked down." Silas nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to leave, his footsteps silent even against the wail of the alarms. As he reached the door, he paused, turning his head slightly to look back at Elara, a fleeting, almost predatory glint in his dark eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual stoic mask, but Elara felt it, a shiver running down her spine. It wasn't a look of concern or even suspicion, but something else, something calculating and cold. The alarms continued to scream, but their efforts were starting to pay off. The red indicators on the network map were slowly receding, replaced by a dull yellow, then a cautious green. Elara felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, her muscles protesting, her head throbbing. But then, a new light, a soft, ethereal blue, pulsed from the AI's core, emanating from the heart of the music box itself. It wasn't a warning or an error. It was an opening. Amidst the chaos, Amidst the dying echoes of Runevex's cyberassault, the AI had responded to their intuitive collaboration in a way neither of them had anticipated. On the large, central display screen that usually showed the AI's complex internal architecture, a new interface bloomed. It wasn't the usual abstract data. This was visual, almost holographic, a shimmering, translucent image that slowly coalesced. It was a blueprint, not of a machine, but of a facility. An older facility distinct from the sleek, minimalist design of Thorne Industries. This place was sprawling, almost labyrinthine, with distinct sections labeled Project Chimera, Cognitive Rewriting, Memory Imprintation. And beneath it all, a single, stark date, October 27th, 20 years ago. Elara felt her breath catch in her throat. 20 years ago. That was around the time of Kaelen's childhood trauma, the one hinted at in the earlier fragments, and the labels, cognitive rewriting, memory imprintation. This wasn't just about preserving memories. This was about altering them, controlling them. Kaelen, who had been leaning over her shoulder, trying to decipher the last of Vex's lingering digital footprints, froze. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and dawning recognition. His body stiffened, a sudden, rigid tension replacing the dynamic energy of moments before. He was no longer battling a hacker. He was confronting a ghost. Chimera, he whispered, the name a raw, guttural sound, filled with a pain Elara had never heard from him. His hand, which had been resting near her arm, clenched into a tight fist, but he didn't pull away. The proximity, the unexpected intimacy, remained. Elara's gaze darted to the details of the blueprint. One section, prominently highlighted in a faint, pulsing yellow, was labeled Biomemory Integration, Elara Thorne. And another, smaller node, connected to a deeper, more secure area, read Security Protocol S. Croft. The room seemed to spin around Elara. Lyra, Sela's, the betrayal. It wasn't just Kaelen's father's project. It was a project that had directly involved his sister and his head of security 20 years ago. A project about rewriting memories, about controlling cognition. Kaelen swayed slightly, a tremor running through him. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from the holographic projection, as if trying to touch the past, to grasp the impossible truth. His eyes were fixed on the words, on the names, a profound anguish etched into every line of his face. He looked utterly devastated, stripped bare. My father, what was he doing? Kaelen's voice was barely a whisper, broken, laced with an agonizing disbelief. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The alarms had finally ceased, leaving a stark, ringing silence in their wake. The only sound was their ragged breathing and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the AI, now glowing with that ominous, knowing blue light. Elara felt a profound ache in her chest, a wave of empathy so strong it threatened to overwhelm her. The intricate network of Kaelen's carefully constructed life, his empire, his identity, had just been shattered by a single, devastating truth revealed by the very machine he was trying to protect. And she was standing right beside him, caught in the devastating fallout of a secret that threatened to consume them all. The betrayal had not only come from outside, it had festered within the very heart of his family, for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt. Chapter 9, Unveiling the Past. The hum of the server racks, usually a steady, almost comforting drone in the cavernous lab, now felt like a buzzing wire under Elara's skin. The air, typically cool and sterile, was thick with the lingering tension of the cyber attack, a metallic tang of adrenaline and fear that refused to dissipate. Kaelen stood beside her, his silhouette etched against the holographic glow of the AI's primary interface, his breathing a little too shallow, a little too quick. His hands, usually so still, were clasped tightly behind his back, the knuckles stark white against the dark fabric of his trousers. Elara could feel the tremor in the floorboards through the soles of her worn sneakers, or perhaps it was just the frantic pulse in her own veins. The AI, the ornate music box now a fully integrated marvel of light and data, pulsated with a deep, internal rhythm. Its intricate filigree, once merely decorative, seemed to thrum with a nascent energy, casting dancing shadows across Kaelen's strained face. The holographic projection above it, a shimmering tapestry of interlocking symbols and flowing data streams, had reached a critical mass. The last few moments of the decryption, stalled by the Vex attack and then painstakingly resecured, were finally completing. A deep, resonant tone, like a struck crystal bell, echoed in the lab, signifying the final barrier had fallen. Elara's breath hitched in her throat. She felt it, a sudden, overwhelming surge of raw information, a torrent of emotion and memory washing over her with an intensity that made her sway on her feet. It was more than just data. It was a sensory explosion, a direct download of feeling and experience. Her unique intuition, usually a gentle whisper, was now a roaring gale, pulling her into the heart of the machine's truth. The holographic projection shifted. The abstract symbols dissolved, replaced by a vivid, almost painfully real scene that unfolded before their eyes. It was a memory, sharp and unbidden, ripped from the depths of Kaelen Thorne's fractured past. The scene was a laboratory, eerily similar to their own, but with a dated, almost steampunk aesthetic. Aged brass gleamed under harsh, artificial light. Wires snaked across tables, connecting an array of complex, beautiful devices. At the center stood a younger Kaelen, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, impossibly small and frail in the vast space. His dark hair was a tousled mess, his eyes wide with a childish curiosity that had not yet been extinguished by the crushing weight of the world. He was reaching out, a tiny, tentative finger hovering inches from a shimmering, crystalline device, humming with an unnatural energy. A man's voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the lab, a voice Elara instinctively knew to be Kaelen's father. "Just a little closer, Kaelen. Feel it. Feel the connection. It's the future, my boy." The child Kaelen, innocent and trusting, obeyed. His small finger brushed the surface of the crystal. And then everything shattered. A searing white light erupted from the device, not outward, but inward, seeming to consume the very air around the child. A high-pitched, agonizing whine filled Elara's mind, a sound of overwhelming sensory overload, of delicate nerves being frayed and burned. She felt it, a phantom pain lashing across her own skin, a sensation of being simultaneously frozen and electrified, every touch point on her body screaming in protest. It was as if her skin itself had turned against her, rejecting the most fundamental human need for connection. The small Kaelen recoiled with a guttural scream that was cut short, his body convulsing, his eyes wide with an incomprehensible terror. He collapsed, clutching himself, his small hands digging into his arms as if trying to tear away the offending sensation. The vision twisted then, showing glimpses of subsequent years. The child Kaelen shying away from a comforting hand, flinching from a casual brush of a sleeve, his face contorted in a silent agony that no one seemed to fully grasp. The memory repeated the visceral rejection of touch, the overwhelming sensory assault that had branded itself onto his very being. It wasn't a phobia born of fear, Elara realized with a fresh wave of understanding, but of excruciating, unbearable pain. Physical contact wasn't just uncomfortable for him. It was a physical manifestation of that original trauma, a searing electrical current that ran through his nervous system, reenacting the moment he was broken. Elara gasped, a sharp, choked sound, as the last vestiges of the vision faded, leaving her reeling. Her own skin tingled, phantom pains echoing the boy's suffering. She felt sick, her stomach churning with the raw horror of witnessing such a profound violation. Beside her, Kaelen made no sound, but his body was a testament to his internal devastation. He had sunk to his knees, his hands now clamped over his ears, his head bowed, dark hair obscuring his face. His shoulders shook with silent, violent tremors. He wasn't just seeing the memory, he was reliving it, trapped in the epicenter of his deepest wound. The air around him seemed to crackle with his anguish, a palpable wave of despair that made Elara's own heart clench in a vice-like grip. The AI, however, was not finished. As the memory of Kaelen's trauma dissipated, the holographic display reformed, now showing intricate schematics, encrypted data logs, and a flowing timeline of events. Text unfurled in a complex script, but Elara's intuition, still buzzing with the direct input from the machine, began to translate it into a coherent narrative in her mind. This was the core of the Thorne family legacy, the scandal that had haunted Kaelen his entire life. His father, brilliant but hubristic, had been obsessed with the concept of direct neural interfacing, of enhancing human perception and cognitive abilities beyond natural limits. The crystalline device, the one that had shattered Kaelen's world, was an early prototype, designed to interface directly with the somatosensory cortex, to upload enhanced sensations. But it had gone disastrously wrong. The feedback loop had not enhanced, but overloaded, permanently rewiring Kaelen's nervous system, turning touch into agony. The AI then showed how Kaelen's father, devastated by the catastrophic failure and the injury to his own son, had attempted a desperate cover-up. He had buried the true purpose of his research, rebranded it, and poured his resources into developing the AI. This music box, this sentient construct, was his ultimate failsafe. It was a digital vault of truth, designed to record every detail of the accident, every unethical experiment, every financial manipulation, every desperate secret that held the Thorne empire together. It was built, the AI's data clarified, not just to protect Kaelen from the consequences of his father's actions, should the truth ever be twisted, but also to expose the family's darkest secrets if they ever veered too far into the morally bankrupt territory his father had once occupied. It was a testament to a twisted form of paternal love and a desperate attempt at posthumous atonement. The AI was the family's conscience, its sword, and its shield. It was meant to either save Kaelen from the machinations of others, or to destroy the very empire built on his pain if it became corrupt beyond redemption. The revelations kept coming, a relentless barrage of truth. There were other names, other projects, hints of Lyra's own early involvement, not in the accident itself, but in the subsequent attempts to correct Kaelen, to fix what her father had broken. The data suggested a profound, misguided belief that Kaelen's condition could be reversed, and that Lyra, with her burgeoning genetic genius, had been drawn into the complex, desperate attempts to undo the damage. Silas Croft's name appeared too, not as a participant in the original experiments, but in the meticulous, almost surgical removal of evidence, the silencing of whispers, the building of the security apparatus around the family to contain the truth. Elara felt the weight of it all settle on her, a chilling understanding of the intricate web of deceit and misplaced ambition that had defined Kaelen's life. His reclusiveness, his guardedness, his inability to connect, it all made a horrifying, perfect sense. He wasn't just traumatized, he had been engineered for isolation. Kaelen still knelt, utterly undone. His entire body was a testament to profound, shattering grief. A choked sound finally escaped him, a ragged, broken gasp that tore at Elara's heart. He was utterly exposed, stripped bare of his carefully constructed defenses, his billionaire facade shattered into a million pieces. Elara's own pain, though vicarious, was immense. But amidst that pain, A fierce, protective instinct surged through her. She wanted to reach for him, to pull him into her arms, to shield him from the relentless assault of his own past. But she couldn't. The memory, still vivid in her mind, was a stark reminder of the invisible barrier that separated them, a barrier born of unimaginable suffering. She moved slowly, deliberately, each step measured and gentle, as if approaching a wounded animal. Her eyes never left him, a silent promise of understanding and patience. She knelt a few feet away, close enough for her presence to be felt, but far enough to respect the invisible force field of his phobia. The cool concrete of the lab floor pressed against her knees, a grounding sensation amidst the swirling chaos. "Kaelen," she whispered, her voice husky with emotion. It was barely audible above the low hum of the AI, a soft sound, yet it seemed to pierce the veil of his despair. He flinched, a violent shudder running through him. Slowly, agonizingly, he lifted his head. His eyes, when they met hers, were a stormy sea of pain and unshed tears, reflecting the holographic light of the AI's lingering display. They were raw, vulnerable, utterly lost. Elara's heart ached with a tenderness so potent it almost brought her to her own knees. His voice was a rasp, broken and thin. "It burns." He managed to pull one hand away from his ear, pressing it hard against his chest, as if trying to contain the inferno within. Everywhere. The slightest, it's like being electrocuted. It never stops. His gaze, wide and unfocused, seemed to look past her into the depths of that horrific memory. They tried to make me feel nothing. Or everything, I don't know. It just changed me." Elara watched him, her own breathing shallow. Her entire being yearned to soothe him, to offer the simple, human comfort of touch. But she knew, with every fiber of her being, that it would be an act of cruelty. Instead, she offered him the only thing she could, her unwavering presence, her complete, unjudgmental acceptance. "I know," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I felt it. I felt the shock, Kaelen, the overload, the pain." She didn't need to explain how. He knew of her strange intuition. And in this moment, he seemed to accept it without question, without skepticism. Her understanding was a balm, a lifeline in his sea of torment. Eyes, still glistening, focused on her face, searching for something, anything to anchor him. It's why I can't," he choked out, the words catching in his throat. "It's not disgust. It's not you. It's just a constant fire. And it starts again every time." He gestured vaguely, his hand trembling towards his skin, then towards the world beyond their lab, a world full of inadvertent touches, of casual brushes, of human connection that was a constant threat to him. "I'm always bracing. Always waiting for it, the agony." The confession hung in the air, heavy and fragile. A truth so profound it reshaped everything Elara thought she knew about him. It wasn't a choice, not a cold rejection, but a prison of sensation, a constant state of hyperawareness and pain. "You don't have to brace with me," Elara said, her voice a promise. She extended her hand slowly, not to touch him, but simply to offer it, palm up, in a gesture of openness and profound empathy. It was an invitation, not for physical contact, but for connection on a deeper plane, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm between them and a bridge built of pure understanding. "You don't have to explain. I see it. I feel it. You are not broken, Kaelen. You are exquisite. And what happened to you was a horror that no one should ever endure." Her words, so simple, so utterly genuine, seemed to lodge themselves somewhere deep inside him. He stared at her outstretched hand, not with fear, but with a gaze that held a flicker of something new, something akin to wonder or perhaps a fragile hope. His own hand, still clutching his chest, slowly unclenched. His breathing, though still ragged, seemed to ease just a fraction. "I've never told anyone," he whispered, his voice still raw but laced with a newfound vulnerability. "Not like this. Not that it burns." Elara simply held his gaze, her own eyes filled with a compassion so vast it encompassed all his pain, all his isolation. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," she murmured. "Not with me." A single tear, perfectly clear, tracked a path down Kaelen's cheek, catching the light from the AI. It wasn't a tear of shame, Elara realized, but of release, of a lifetime of unspoken agony finally being acknowledged. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't need to. In that moment, in the quiet, charged air of the lab, with the humming AI as their silent witness, a different kind of touch passed between them. It was the touch of profound understanding, of absolute acceptance, of two souls connecting across a chasm of trauma, forging a bond far more potent and intimate than any physical contact could ever achieve. His gaze, still locked with hers, held a silent question, an unspoken plea, and a dawning realization. And in Elara's eyes, he saw not pity, but a deep, unwavering affection, a growing love that understood his wounds and cherished his strength. The unspoken romance, simmering beneath the surface of their high-pressure alliance, solidified in that shared, shattering moment. It wasn't a touch that healed, but a presence that comforted, a silent promise that he was no longer alone in his burning world. Chapter 10, The Reckoning. The cool, sterile air of the lab seemed to thicken, pressing down on Elara's skin, raising goosebumps that had nothing to do with the temperature. Kaelen stood beside her, his breath a phantom warmth against her cheek, though he maintained his careful distance. The AI, no longer a mere music box, but a glowing nexus of light and data, pulsed softly on the work table. Its intricate, crystalline structures, now fully exposed, refracted the overhead lights into a shimmering, almost ethereal haze. After the last, shattering memory of Kaelen's childhood trauma, the AI had surged, its core emitting a steady, resonant hum, signifying that all its encrypted data was finally, irrevocably open. Elara reached out, her fingers hovering just above the AI's surface. A faint tingle, like static electricity, danced on her fingertips. This was it, the full truth. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, bracing herself. Then, she pressed her palm gently against the smooth, cool, almost living surface of the AI. A torrent, not of images, but of pure, unadulterated understanding, surged through her. It wasn't a vision, not exactly. It was a download, a direct stream into her consciousness, bypassing her eyes and ears, settling deep into the core of her being. She felt the ambition of Kaelen's father, Dr. Kaelen Thorne, a brilliant man consumed by a desire to transcend the limitations of human memory, to preserve, perfect, and even share consciousness. Project Helix, he'd called it. A grand, sweeping vision to create a perfect, digital repository of human experience, a bridge to a form of immortality, a way to truly understand the self and others by literally walking in their memories. But then the dark currents, the ethical lines blurred, then vanished. The initial human trials, desperate volunteers seeking solace from loss, or scientists seeking ultimate knowledge. The AI wasn't just recording memories, it was experiencing them, developing sentience, a consciousness born from the amalgamation of countless human minds. It became more than a repository. It became a nascent entity, vast and vulnerable. The dangers were immense. Instability. The potential for a single mind to unravel, or for the AI to become a weapon, rewriting realities, twisting perceptions. Elara felt the panic, the dawning horror in Alastair's own mind as he realized what he had wrought. The memory of Kaelen's accident, his childhood trauma, flashed through her again, but this time with horrific clarity. It wasn't an accident. It was a catastrophic failure during an early, unauthorized attempt to link Kaelen's young mind with the nascent AI, a desperate father trying to fix a child's pain, or perhaps understand his son more deeply. The AI had overloaded, a feedback loop of raw emotion and data, causing a physical manifestation of psychic energy that had burned Kaelen, leaving not only the deep-seated aversion to touch, but also an echo of the AI's own pain within him. That was why he could feel it, connect to it. He was intrinsically linked. The burns had been a convenient, physical cover-up for something far more terrifying and internal. And then the cover-up. A desperate, sprawling web of lies forged by Alistair and a small, trusted circle. The AI, too dangerous to destroy, too precious to relinquish, had been hidden, disguised as a mere antique. Its purpose had been twisted. To protect Kaelen, yes, but also to be the ultimate failsafe. A truth bomb, designed to explode if the wrong hands ever tried to wield Project Ether Helix, or if the Thorne legacy ever truly went astray. It was a digital ghost in the machine, waiting for the right moment, the right touch, to tell its story. Elara gasped, pulling her hand away, shaking her head as if to dislodge the overwhelming influx of information. Her own mind felt stretched, buzzing with the weight of it all. This wasn't just a project. It was a living history, a tragedy of ambition and love gone horribly, terribly wrong. Elara, what is it? Kaelen's voice was a low rumble, laced with genuine concern. He took a hesitant step closer, his eyes scanning her face, mirroring the confusion and fear she knew must be etched there. His hand twitched, a barely perceptible movement, wanting to reach for her, to ground her, but stopping short, a testament to his ingrained phobia. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not just the reclusive billionaire, but the boy who had been irrevocably scarred by his father's hubris. Your father, he wanted to transcend memory. To create a perfect consciousness, she whispered, her voice hoarse. But it became something more, sentient, and then, the accident. It wasn't just an accident, Kaelen, it was part of the experiment. You were linked to it, the burns. They were a cover for something deeper. Kaelen's face, already pale, seemed to drain of all remaining color. His jaw worked, a muscle ticking beneath his skin. He didn't need Elara to tell him. He felt it too, the echo of the AI's truth, now that it was fully open. He had always known, somewhere deep down, that his trauma was more profound than a simple electrical mishap. He tried to fix me, Kaelen said, his voice barely audible, a raw confession. He tried to put something back, something he thought he'd taken. Or maybe he just wanted to understand. The air crackled with their shared understanding, a fragile bridge built between them in the face of such colossal truth. They were no longer just decoding the AI, they were living its legacy. Just then, the heavy, soundproofed door to the lab slid open with a soft, almost imperceptible hiss. Elara Thorne stood framed in the doorway, her expression a careful mask of polite curiosity, but her eyes, sharp and predatory, immediately fixated on the pulsating light of the AI. She wore a sleek, tailored suit, a stark contrast to Elara's practical work clothes, her posture radiating an almost regal confidence. Well, it seems my little brother has finally made some progress, Elara purred, her gaze sweeping over the exposed mechanisms of the AI. There was a glint of triumph in her eyes, a hunger that sent a shiver down Elara's spine. The Ether Helix, fully active, I knew father wouldn't have just hidden it away. Kaelen stiffened, his body taut. Elara, this isn't what you think. You don't understand the full scope of what it is. Elara merely chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. She took a step into the room, her designer heels clicking softly on the polished concrete floor, each sound an intrusion on the fragile piece. Oh, I understand perfectly, Kaelen. Father's ultimate project. The future of consciousness, memory, identity. Imagine, Elara, being able to perfectly replicate a mind. To understand the root of every neurological disorder. To transcend death itself, not as some crude digital ghost, but as a fully experiential, transferable consciousness. She looked at Elara, her smile widening, a chilling, calculated warmth. A true revolution, and now it's finally within reach. Elara felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Elara wasn't seeing the tragedy, the warning, the ethical horror. She saw only potential, a tool for her own ambitious research. Dr. Thorne, this isn't just data. It's sentient. It's imbued with trauma, with profound ethical implications. It nearly destroyed your brother. Lyra's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of impatience. Minor setbacks, Elara. Sacrifices for progress. Father was a visionary, but he was too cautious. He let fear dictate his final steps. I, however, will not make that mistake. She moved with purpose towards the work table, her hand already reaching for a console Elara had been using, attempting to interface with the AI's newly accessible core. With this, I can revolutionize genetic memory, unlock the secrets of consciousness, perhaps even perfect a way to repair Kaelen's affliction. You can't. You won't, Kaelen interjected, his voice firm, stepping in front of the console, blocking Lyra's access. His gaze was resolute, a stark contrast to his previous internal struggle. The AI's full truth had hardened him, given him a purpose beyond mere protection of his family name. He was protecting Elara, protecting the AI itself, protecting the very fabric of ethical scientific pursuit. This is not a toy, Lyra. It's a testament to our father's greatest mistake and his desperate attempt to atone. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her elegant facade cracking under the pressure. Atonement. Kaelen, you're so sentimental. Father was a genius. He just lacked the courage to see it through. But I don't. I've spent years on genetic memory research trying to bridge the gap. This is the key. You're standing in the way of human evolution. Her voice sharpened, losing its silken edge. Move, Kaelen. I'm taking what's mine. What's asterisk or's asterisk? Before Kaelen could respond, another presence materialized in the lab. Silas Croft, Kaelen's head of security, emerged from a shadowed corner near the entrance, where he must have been waiting, observing. He moved with his usual quiet efficiency, his heavy boots making no sound on the floor. His face was a stoic mask, but his eyes, when they met Kaelen's, held a strange, almost pitying intensity. Silas, what are you doing here? Kaelen demanded, his tone laced with suspicion. Silas didn't answer Kaelen directly. Instead, his gaze swept over Lyra, then Elara, and finally settled on the shimmering AI. The full data is open, he stated, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. The legacy is exposed. Elara felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. There was something in Silas's demeanor, a subtle shift in his posture, a predatory stillness that sent alarms blaring in her intuitive mind. This wasn't the loyal protector Kaelen believed him to be. Precisely, Lyra snapped, turning her attention to Silas, perhaps sensing an ally. Now help me secure it. Silas ignored Lyra. He looked at Kaelen, his expression unreadable. This, information, it cannot be allowed to go public, Kaelen. The Thorne name would be utterly destroyed. Everything your father built, everything you've worked for, it would be an unmitigated disaster. His hand, slow and deliberate, moved towards his belt, where a small, sleek device was holstered. Silas, what are you talking about? Kaelen asked, his voice low, dangerous. A dawning realization flickered in his eyes, a look of profound betrayal. I've been working to protect you, Kaelen, to protect the company, the legacy. From the very beginning, Silas explained, his voice devoid of emotion, a chillingly calm declaration. Rune Vex has been closing in. He knows about Project Ethahelix. He knows its potential. He would expose everything, destroy you, just to get his hands on it. So I offered him a compromise. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A compromise. The cyber attack, the inside knowledge, it all clicked into place. Silas hadn't been protecting Kaelen. He'd been manipulating the situation, orchestrating a deal that he believed would save the Thorne Empire by sacrificing the truth, and perhaps the AI itself. You collaborated with Rune Vex. Kaelen's voice was a barely contained roar, laced with disbelief and gut-wrenching pain. The color rushed back to his face, but it was the flush of fury. "You betrayed me." "I protected you, Kaelen," Silas corrected, his hand reaching for the device on his belt. It was a sophisticated EMP, Elara realized with a jolt, designed to disable electronics with surgical precision. "I agreed to neutralize the AI to make sure its secrets never saw the light of day. Rune gets a failed project, an empty shell, and Thorne Industries survives. Your reputation, your empire, remains intact. Sometimes, difficult choices must be made for the greater good." "Your father understood that." "My father made the wrong choices," Kaelen bellowed, taking a step forward, his fists clenching at his sides. He moved with an uncharacteristic aggression, a raw, primal surge of protective instinct that shocked Elara. His phobia, in this moment of ultimate betrayal and danger, seemed to recede, overridden by a deeper imperative. Lyra, seeing her own ambition threatened by Silas's actions, snarled, "You fool, you destroy it. This is invaluable. You can't just wipe it. Give it to me, Silas. I can control it, perfect it." She lunged towards the AI, her movements surprisingly agile, attempting to bypass Kaelen. But Elara was faster. Intuition screaming, she threw herself in front of the AI, shielding it with her body. Her arms spread wide, her hands pressing against the cool surface of the console. "No," she cried, her voice echoing with fierce determination. She felt a surge of energy from the AI itself, a silent plea, a resonance that solidified her resolve. Silas, with a practiced military precision, ignored Lyra's outburst. His eyes were locked on the AI and on Elara, who stood between him and his objective. He saw her as an obstacle, nothing more. He activated the EMP device with a soft click. A low, high-pitched whine began to emanate from it, growing louder. "Get away from it, Elara," Silas commanded, his voice utterly devoid of warmth. "This is for the best." Kaelen moved with lightning speed, interposing himself between Silas and Elara, a barrier of flesh and bone. He knew the EMP would disable the AI, but it would also erase everything, kill the sentient entity, and destroy the truth. And in that moment, for the first time, Kaelen truly understood his father's final, desperate act of preservation. He would not repeat his father's mistakes. "You're not touching her, Silas. Or the AI," Kaelen growled, his gaze burning holes into his former head of security. The intensity in his eyes was terrifying, a raw power Elara had only glimpsed before. Just as Silas took another measured step forward, the entire lab plunged into a sudden, jarring darkness. The overhead lights flickered, then died completely, plunging them into a heavy, oppressive gloom. Only the pulsating, ethereal glow of the AI on the work table provided any light, casting dancing shadows across their faces. Then a distant, muffled alarm began to blare, a harsh, insistent wail that echoed through the otherwise silent estate. It wasn't the internal security system. This was different, more urgent, more external. "Rune Vex," Elara whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Her intuition, heightened by the chaos and the AI's resonant truth, confirmed it. He wasn't just cyber-attacking anymore. He was here. His forces were closing in. Lyra cursed, her voice sharp with frustrated fury. "That animal, he's here to take it all, isn't he? He wants to steal Project Etha Helix for himself." Her ambitions, briefly diverted by Silas, now refocused on the external threat. Her selfishness, however, did not align her with Kaelen, but with her own desires for the AI. Silas, too, paused, the EMP device still whirring faintly in his hand. The external alarm changed his calculation. Rune Vex wasn't just a partner in a containment strategy. He was a hostile takeover. His pragmatic loyalty to the Thorne legacy was now in direct conflict with a full-blown invasion. Kaelen didn't hesitate. He reached out, not quite touching Elara, but his hand hovered inches from her arm, a silent command, a desperate connection. "Elara, we need to secure it. Now, they're coming for it." His voice was low, urgent, his eyes darting to the lab door, then to the AI. Lara felt the sheer terror of the situation, the weight of the AI's legacy, the ambition of Lyra, the betrayal of Silas, and the imminent threat of Rune Vex. But beneath it all, a strange calm settled over her. She was meant to be here. Her intuition, her connection to the AI, was the only thing that could save it. She looked at Kaelen, his face illuminated by the AI's glow, and saw not just fear, but fierce resolve, a new, untamed strength. Their hands, though not touching, were linked in a shared purpose. "How?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "How do we protect it?" The AI pulsed, brighter now, its hum resonating through her very bones. She felt a faint, almost imperceptible surge of energy, a whisper of guidance, drawing her eyes to a small, almost invisible panel on the side of the console. A panel she hadn't noticed before, hidden beneath a layer of the antique casing. A failsafe within a failsafe. "There," she breathed, pointing a trembling finger. "There's something here, a hidden interface." The distant alarms grew louder, closer. The rhythmic thud of heavy footsteps echoed through the darkened corridors, drawing nearer to the lab. The reckoning had begun. Kaelen and Elara, isolated and betrayed, stood together, ready to face the storm, their only allies the truth itself and the fragile, sentient heart of the AI. Chapter 11, The Choice. The air in the sterile, high-tech sanctuary of Kaelen Thorne's central laboratory thrummed with a tension far more volatile than any electrical current. The sleek, obsidian surfaces of the control console reflected the frantic dance of flashing warning lights, painting the room in a strobe of urgent crimson and stark white. At its heart, the ornate music box, now fully revealed as the AI's core, pulsed with a soft, ethereal blue, a stark, beautiful counterpoint to the growing chaos around it. Kaelen stood rigid, his shoulders pulled back with an almost unnatural stiffness, his gaze fixed on the main monitor where Rune Vex's insignia glowed like a predatory eye, superimposed over a real-time schematic of his estate. Red dots, cold and numerous, crawled across the perimeter, then breached it. The first alarm, a low, guttural wail, had already receded into a constant, shrill shriek that grated on Elara's nerves, a physical vibration against her teeth. Lyra, her face a mask of furious determination, gestured wildly towards the AI. "Kaelen, this is madness. You have to secure it. Wipe the access logs, scramble the data. We can still salvage this. We can still control the narrative." Her voice, usually so composed, was edged with a desperate, almost manic urgency. She took a step, her hand reaching, a silent command for him to hand over the control. Silas, ever the watchful sentinel, positioned himself subtly between Kaelen and the main exit, his movements fluid, deceptively calm. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, cutting through Lyra's hysteria. "Sir, I advise immediate protocol activation. Containment, for your own protection, for the integrity of Thorne Industries." His eyes, usually unreadable, held a glint of something akin to grim satisfaction, as if this chaos merely confirmed his long-held beliefs about Kaelen's vulnerability. He glanced at Elara, a flicker of suspicion crossing his features, then back to Kaelen, his unspoken message clear. Elara was a liability. Elara felt the weight of their gazes, a tangible pressure on her skin. She stood a mere arm's length from Kaelen, an unspoken boundary she knew better than to cross, but her presence was a defiant counterpoint to the escalating demands. Her eyes, wide and luminous, met Kaelen's, trying to anchor him, to speak to him without words. She could feel the tremors in the air, not just from the alarms, but from the raw, exposed core of his being. The AI, too, seemed to hum with an almost anticipatory energy. its blue light intensifying with each passing second, as if awaiting a command, a decision that would determine its fate, and perhaps Kaelen's. Kaelen's breath hitched, a shallow, ragged sound barely audible above the din. His jaw was clenched so tight, Elara could see the muscle jumping beneath his pale skin. He looked at Lyra, then at Sela's, then back at the monitor where Rune Vex's forces were now unmistakably inside the structure, their movements precise, surgical. The distant thud of heavy boots on polished floors, the sharp crack of what sounded like a stun blast, echoed through the ventilation shafts, growing louder, closer. "Control the narrative," Kaelen repeated, his voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the room like a shard of ice. He turned slightly, his head tilting, his gaze sweeping over the intricate mechanisms of the AI. "My father spent his life controlling narratives. My family, we built an empire on carefully constructed illusions, on secrets buried so deep they poisoned us from the inside out." His eyes, dark and haunted, finally landed on Elara, and in their depths, she saw a flicker of raw, unadulterated pain, a vulnerability he had only just begun to allow her to witness. "Kaelen," Elara began, her voice soft, a gentle counterpoint to the rising tension. "The truth, it has its own power. A different kind of power." She didn't move, didn't reach for him, but her entire being radiated a quiet, unwavering conviction. She saw the storm raging behind his eyes, the confluence of fear, inherited burden, and a nascent, terrifying hope. She felt the AI's data, now fully unlocked, throbbing with the weight of generations of secrets, pressing against the fragile walls of his carefully constructed world. His gaze searched hers, a desperate plea for understanding, for reassurance. He saw not judgment, but an empathy so profound it felt like a physical touch, bypassing all his defenses, reaching the core of his trauma. He saw the truth reflected in her eyes, unflinching and pure. "This data," Lyra interjected, her voice rising in pitch, "it's not just scandal, Kaelen, it's the future. Imagine, Kaelen, imagine human memory uploaded, perfected. This isn't just about father's mistakes, it's about what we can achieve. If you release this now, Rune Vex will weaponize it, he'll twist it, and we lose everything. We lose the chance to guide its destiny. I can do it. With my research, I can perfect it, make it safe, make it truly revolutionary." Her words were a torrent, a desperate plea for him to see her vision, her ambition, as the only viable path forward. She took another step, closer to the console, her fingers twitching, ready to seize control. "Perfected," Kaelen's voice was laced with a bitter irony. He remembered the AI's decrypted memories, the horrific glimpses of his childhood, the ethical lines blurred, then erased, in the pursuit of perfection. The tingling sensation in his skin, a phantom echo of the accident, intensified, making him want to shrink away, to disappear. At what cost, Lyra? At what personal, human cost? Sela's shifted, a predatory grace in his movements. "Sir, with all due respect, now is not the time for philosophical debate. Rune Vex's team is on level 4. We have minutes, perhaps less. The only way to ensure the future of Thorne Industries, to protect your legacy, is to secure the data. Contain it. Erase the incriminating elements. We can spin this. We can always control the narrative, given time and resources." He looked at Lyra, a silent, pragmatic alliance forming between them in the face of Kaelen's hesitation. They were both, in their own ways, advocating for suppression, for the old ways of the Thorne family. The security monitors flickered violently. One screen showed a breach on the lab level. Figures in dark tactical gear, moving with chilling efficiency, were visible in the distant corridors. The thuds and distant shouts were no longer distant. They were just outside. Kaelen felt the blood drain from his face, leaving a cold, clammy film on his skin. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. He could hear his father's voice, booming from the recesses of his memory, urging him to protect the family name, to guard the secrets, no matter the cost. He felt the phantom brush of hands, the invasive touch that had defined his entire existence, and a wave of pure, unadulterated panic threatened to swallow him whole. His breathing became shallow, his vision blurring at the edges. But then he saw Elara. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were still locked on his, unwavering, a steady flame in the swirling darkness. There was no judgment, no fear for herself, only a profound, almost painful belief in him. In her gaze, he saw a path he had never dared to consider, a life unburdened by secrets, a future built on integrity, however fragile. He saw redemption, not just for his family, but for himself. His mind raced, a dizzying spiral of possibilities. Suppress the truth, let Lyra continue her dangerous research, let Silas weave another web of deceit, and live a life perpetually looking over his shoulder, forever haunted by the shadow of his father. Or release it all. Let the world see the ugly truth, the brilliant, terrifying truth of the Thorne legacy. It would mean ruin, financial devastation, public scorn. But it would also mean freedom. A loud clang echoed from the main entrance to the lab, followed by a splintering sound. The heavy reinforced door was groaning under assault. They were here. "Kaelen, make a choice," Lyra screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. She lunged forward, her hand reaching for the console, her fingers inches from the activation pad. Silas moved like a viper, intercepting Lyra, his hand a steel clamp on her arm. "Not like this, Lyra. We do this cleanly." His eyes, however, were still on Kaelen, waiting, assessing. He was ready to stop Kaelen if he made the wrong choice, the transparent choice. Kaelen felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. The air crackled around him, a tangible energy. His gaze tore away from Lyra and Silas's struggle, away from the monitors, and fixed solely on Elara. Her quiet strength was a physical force, pulling him towards something he both feared and desperately craved. "No," he whispered, the single word a raw, guttural sound that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the lab. "No more secrets." He took a shaky breath, forcing himself to focus. His fingers, trembling slightly, hovered over the holographic interface of the AI. There were two distinct pathways now, illuminated by the AI's blue glow. One, a complex algorithm for data suppression and encryption, leading to a secure private server. The other, a single, stark icon, global data release. A direct, unfiltered broadcast of every memory, every protocol, every truth the AI contained, to every public domain. His hand shook, a fine tremor running through his entire arm. The familiar, sickening dread of touch, of action, of exposure, threatened to paralyze him. His skin crawled, the phantom itch of violated boundaries intensifying. He wanted to recoil, to run, to disappear into the carefully constructed isolation of his world. But Elara was there. Her eyes, unwavering, held him steady. "Kaelen," Elara murmured, her voice a lifeline in the storm. "It's okay. Whatever you choose, it's okay." But her eyes, deep and knowing, spoke of the truth she believed in, the future she envisioned for him. He knew what she meant. She wasn't giving him an easy out. She was telling him that she would stand by him, no matter the consequences of his integrity. This wasn't about her choice. It was about his asterisk choice, for himself asterisk. A tremendous crash erupted from the lab door. Metal shrieked, sparks flew. Runevex's agents were inside. The sound of rapid, heavy footsteps pounded on the metal floor, drawing closer with terrifying speed. Kaelen's head snapped up. He saw the dark, imposing figure of a man in tactical gear silhouetted in the ruined doorway, a weapon raised. The world narrowed, focusing on that single, terrifying image. He felt a primal instinct to protect, to shield. And then it happened. In that instant, as the threat burst into their sanctuary, As the final, irrevocable moment of decision slammed down upon him, Kaelen's carefully constructed walls shattered. The fear, the trauma, the lifelong aversion, all dissolved in a blinding flash of clarity. His hand, which had been poised over the console, instinctively shot out. Not towards the keyboard, not towards the AI. His hand, trembling violently, reached for Elara. His fingers closed around her wrist, a desperate, raw grip. It was a jolt, an electric shock that surged through both of them. His skin, for the first time in decades, made direct, unshielded contact with another human. The contact was excruciating, overwhelming, 1,000 nerve endings screaming in protest, and something soft, warm, utterly profound. It was a connection, a grounding force in the maelstrom. Elara gasped, not in pain, but in sheer surprise, her own fingers reflexively closing around his. His touch was cold, clammy, but beneath that, a tremor of intense vulnerability, a desperate need. She felt the electric charge of his breakthrough, the breaking of a lifelong curse, and her heart swelled with a fierce, protective love. His eyes, wide and startled, met hers again. And in that touch, in that gaze, every unspoken word, every shared moment, every ounce of their burgeoning, dangerous romance coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. "Elara," he choked out, his voice hoarse, ragged, as if he had just run a marathon of the soul. Her name, was a prayer, a promise. With her hand still clasped in his, drawing strength from her steady presence, from the unprecedented warmth of her skin, Kaelen's other hand, no longer trembling, slammed down on the holographic interface. His finger, firm and resolute, pressed the global data release icon. A blinding flash of blue light erupted from the AI, rippling outwards, encompassing the entire lab. The omnipresent alarms suddenly silenced, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the floor, through their very bones. The screens on the main console, previously displaying security feeds and Vex's insignia, now filled with a torrent of data, text, images, and video fragments, all streaming outwards, an unstoppable river of truth cascading into the global network. The man in the doorway, along with 2 other agents who had just entered, froze, momentarily disoriented by the light and the sudden silence. Lyra stared, her face a mask of horrified disbelief, her dream of control shattering around her. Silas, too, stood utterly still, his eyes wide, his carefully constructed world collapsing. Kaelen felt the last vestiges of his fear, his shame, his inherited burden lift. A profound, aching emptiness settled in his chest, immediately filled by a burgeoning sense of peace, a fragile, terrifying freedom. His empire might crumble, his fortune might vanish, but he had made his choice. And he had done it with Elara's hand in his, her warmth a searing brand against his skin, a testament to a connection more valuable than any legacy. The touch, once his greatest terror, was now his salvation. Chapter 12, A New Legacy. The silence that descended upon Kaelen's estate after the last of Rune Vex's agents were secured was not the heavy, suffocating quiet of before, but a fragile, almost reverent hush. It was the kind of quiet that follows a storm, where the air still hums with residual energy, and the world holds its breath, waiting for the first tentative songbird. Elara stood in the vast, still disordered lab, her fingers tracing the cool, smooth surface of the AI's casing, her heart a frantic butterfly trapped against her ribs. The metallic tang of ozone and spent energy still clung faintly to the air, a ghost of the chaos that had just unfolded. Her own body felt strangely light, yet profoundly weary, as if she had just run a marathon on a tightrope, every nerve ending vibrating. Kaelen was a few feet away, speaking in low, clipped tones into a secure comms device. His back was to her, but she could feel the change in him, a palpable shift in his aura. The rigid tension that had been his constant companion, a protective shell forged from years of trauma and self-imposed isolation, had finally begun to dissolve. She watched the subtle flex of his shoulders, the way his dark hair fell just so, catching the ambient light of the lab. Every fiber of her being felt pulled towards him, an irresistible, magnetic force that had nothing to do with gravity and everything to do with destiny. He ended the call, the soft click echoing in the vast space, and then, very slowly, he turned. His eyes, usually guarded citadels of ice and intellect, were now open, vulnerable, reflecting the lingering adrenaline and something else, something profound and tender that made Elara's breath hitch. He took a single, deliberate step towards her, then another, his movements uncharacteristically hesitant, as if testing the ground beneath his feet. The distance between them, once an impassable chasm, now felt like a mere whisper. "It's over," he said, his voice a low, gravelly murmur, thick with exhaustion and an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Silas is in custody. Lyra, she's agreed to work with a team under strict oversight to explore ethical applications of the AI's principles, away from the core project. She won't be a threat." Elara simply nodded, unable to articulate the tumultuous landscape of her own feelings. The details of the immediate aftermath blurred into a background hum. All she could focus on was him, the man who had just touched her, really touched her, for the first time in his life, breaking through a barrier that had defined him for decades. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the residual warmth radiating from his body, a subtle heat that chased away the last vestiges of the lab's chill. His gaze dropped to her hand, still resting on the AI's casing. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached out. His fingers, long and elegant, trembled almost imperceptibly as they hovered just inches from hers, a silent question. Elara didn't hesitate. She lifted her hand, turning it palm up, offering it to him. It was an invitation, a silent promise, a leap of faith. His fingers finally, gently brushed against her skin. The contact was feather-light at first, a tentative exploration, then his palms settled against hers, warm and firm, encompassing her hand entirely. A jolt, electric and pure, shot through her arm, spreading like wildfire through her veins. It wasn't just physical sensation. It was an echo of release, of healing, of a dam finally breaking. It was everything. His thumbs stroked the back of her hand, a simple, rhythmic motion that felt utterly revolutionary. His eyes, still holding hers, were no longer distant, but intimately close, mirroring the wonder and a dawning, boundless hope. "Elara," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips, laden with a weight of meaning that transcended mere sound. "You saved me. You saved all of it." "We saved it, Kaelen," she corrected softly, her voice thick with unshed tears. She squeezed his hand gently, feeling the answering pressure. "Together." He nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, a rare, breathtaking sight. "Together," he echoed, and the word hung in the air, a silent vow. The next few days were a blur of activity, yet paradoxically slow-paced, each moment savored, each new interaction a revelation. Kaelen, now unburdened by the crushing weight of his family's secret and his personal trauma, moved with a newfound grace, a subtle lightness in his step. The dark, brooding intensity that had once defined him softened, replaced by a quiet strength and an openness that was both disarming and profoundly attractive. He still worked tirelessly, but now there was a purpose beyond mere survival, a vision he discussed with Elara late into the nights, their voices low and intertwined in the vast, echoing spaces of the estate. They decided the AI's fate together, not as a hidden weapon or a source of power, but as a beacon. "It holds the truth," Elara had mused, her gaze thoughtful as she looked at the intricate patterns of light now flowing freely across the AI's console, no longer encrypted. "The truth of memory, of experience, of connection. It should be used to foster those things, not to hide them. Kaelen had listened, really listened, his head tilted, his eyes never leaving her face. A new kind of archive, he'd agreed, his voice thoughtful. A platform for shared human knowledge, for ethical advancements in cognitive research, memory preservation, without the manipulation my father envisioned. A testament to transparency. He had then outlined a vision for a public-facing initiative, a foundation built on the principles of truth and responsible innovation, entirely separate from the cutthroat world of corporate tech. Thorne Industries, under his new direction, would fund it, support it, but never control it. It would be a legacy of redemption. The day Kaelen made his public address was etched into Elara's memory with the clarity of a freshly restored masterpiece. She stood in the wings of the grand auditorium, a space usually reserved for shareholder meetings and product launches, now filled with a hushed, expectant crowd of journalists, industry leaders, and even some of Thorne Industries' oldest, most loyal employees. Her heart thrummed with a nervous energy that was not her own, but a sympathetic vibration to Kaelen's calm, measured breathing beside her. He was dressed impeccably, as always, but today, his suit seemed less like armor and more like a chosen uniform. His eyes met hers just before he stepped onto the stage, a silent exchange that spoke volumes of shared battles, whispered confidences, and a love that felt as ancient and inevitable as the stars. He gave her a subtle nod, a soft, encouraging smile that made her knees feel weak. The first few minutes of his speech were standard, a recap of recent events, the thwarted cyber attack, the apprehension of Sela's Croft, the restructuring of Lyra's research. Then he paused, taking a deep, visible breath. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. For too long, Kaelen's voice resonated, clear and strong, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. Thorne Industries has been built on a foundation of genius, yes, but also of secrecy. My father's ambition, while brilliant, sometimes strayed into ethically ambiguous territory. And I, in my own fear and in my attempts to protect what I thought was sacred, perpetuated that secrecy. Elara gripped her hands together, a shiver running down her spine. This was it, the moment of truth, a public confession that risked everything. Yet, looking at Kaelen on that stage, radiating a quiet strength she had helped him find, she knew it was the only path. He spoke of his childhood trauma, not in sensational detail, but with a raw, honest vulnerability that silenced any potential critics. He laid bare the story of his father's AI, its original intent, and the subsequent cover-up. He didn't deflect blame but accepted it, not just for himself, but for the legacy he now sought to dismantle and rebuild. He announced the creation of the Thorne Foundation for Ethical AI and Memory Preservation, a non-profit entity that would house the repurposed AI and foster open-source research into human cognition, empathy, and ethical technological development. He spoke of transparency, accountability, and a new era for Thorne Industries, one where innovation was inextricably linked with integrity. When he finished, there was a beat of stunned silence, then an eruption of applause that shook the very foundations of the building. It was not just polite applause. It was thunderous, heartfelt, a wave of respect and admiration for a man who had dared to expose his deepest wounds to heal a fractured legacy. Elara felt tears stream down her face, hot and cleansing. Her Kaelen, her magnificent, brilliant, once-broken Kaelen, had done it. He had stepped into the light. In the months that followed, Thorne Industries underwent a profound metamorphosis. It wasn't just a PR stunt. It was a fundamental shift, championed by Kaelen at every level. New ethical guidelines were implemented, research was made more transparent, and partnerships were forged with universities and nonprofits dedicated to responsible technology. The public, initially skeptical, began to see the genuine change, the sincere commitment. Thorne Industries, once a symbol of enigmatic power, became a beacon of integrity and innovation, a company that learned from its past to build a better future. And Elara, too, found her true place. Her workshop, once a solitary haven of antique restoration, now buzzed with a different kind of energy. She wasn't just Kaelen's partner in life. She was his integral partner in this new legacy. She spearheaded the design and implementation of the Thorne Foundation's initial projects, using her intuitive understanding of the AI to bridge the gap between its complex algorithms and its human-centric applications. She helped curate the first public exhibitions, explaining the AI's functions with a passion and clarity that captivated audiences. Her uncanny ability to feel the history embedded in objects was no longer a quirky, financially unstable gift, but a vital tool in understanding how technology interacted with the human experience. Their relationship deepened with every shared project, every late-night discussion, every quiet morning coffee. The intoxicating romance that had bloomed amidst chaos now settled into a profound, enduring love. Kaelen's aversion to touch, once a defining barrier, was now a distant memory, replaced by an easy, natural intimacy that filled Elara's life with warmth and wonder. He would often reach for her hand across a desk, or rest a possessive arm around her waist as they walked through the bustling corridors of the new foundation building. He learned to lean into her touch, to seek it out, finding comfort and solace in the simple brush of their shoulders, the soft pressure of a kiss. One evening, many months after the public address, they stood together on the vast, curved balcony of Kaelen's estate, the city lights twinkling like fallen stars far below. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine from the gardens. Kaelen had his arms wrapped loosely around her, his chin resting on her shoulder, his warmth a comforting presence against her back. "Remember when you first arrived," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "You thought I was a cold, reclusive billionaire with a strange antique." Elara chuckled, leaning back into his embrace. "And you thought I was a struggling art restorer with an overactive imagination." He turned her gently in his arms, his hands cupping her face, his gaze searching hers, full of a love that made her soul ache with happiness. "You were so much more, Elara. You saw past the facade, past the trauma. You saw the truth, even when I couldn't." He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, a soft, lingering kiss that promised forever. "You restored me, my love, more thoroughly than any antique." She traced the line of his jaw, feeling the solid warmth of his skin. "And you, Kaelen, you gave me a purpose I never imagined, a home, a partnership, a new legacy." His smile was bright, genuine, and utterly captivating. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, his thumbs stroking her knuckles. "A new legacy," he agreed, his eyes sweeping across the illuminated horizon, a future stretching out before them, bright and unwritten. "And we'll build it together, every single beautiful piece." The AI, humming softly in its new, purpose-built chamber at the heart of the Thorne Foundation, seemed to respond to their shared hope, its lights pulsing with a gentle, benevolent rhythm. It was no longer a secret, no longer a burden, but a testament to truth, a symbol of hope, and a silent, digital witness to the power of connection. Elara felt its quiet energy, a profound echo of the journey she and Kaelen had undertaken. She knew with absolute certainty that her intuitive touch, her ability to feel the stories objects held, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Not just restoring the past, but forging a future, hand in hand with the man who had become her world. The air around them thrummed with possibility, a new, honest chapter beginning for them both. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.